Well, we are live, pals, and welcome to a jam-packed edition of Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. Normally, I introduce myself as Tyler and I throw it to Mike and ask how Mike's doing. But Mike, no offense, I don't really care how you're doing right now because we brought on an amazing guest today. He is one half of the IWS Tag Team Championships. He is also the GNW Canadian Champion, the one and only Jeremy Prophet. Jeremy, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's very rare that I have a bad day, so I'm always in a pretty good mood. And I'm especially in a good mood to be joined by two great Canadians like yourself to be able to have this wonderful opportunity to speak to another group of fans and to let them know what Jeremy Prophet, the silver tongue sex symbol, the harbinger of truth, at this point, the ambassador of Canada, is all about. So whenever you want to get this underway, I'm ready to sink my teeth into this episode. I count it out.
Oh, beautiful. See, Mike, you see why I went to ask how he was doing first? You can't do that.
Years ago, 10 years ago, I would have been able to do that. Now it's just like, hey, my hockey team won tonight.
Well, we got a jam-packed show today. We're going to get all into Jeremy's career. Lots of fun stories he's got for us. We're also going to be counting down the top 7 moments in the career of Daniel Bryan, not just WWE career, but his entire career. That was a tough one for me to put together this week. But before we get to all that, I want to get both of you guys' take on the big story going around in the world of professional wrestling right now. And that is The Miz cashing in that Money in the Bank briefcase, and he is our new world champion. Let's start with you, Jeremy. Did you see that one coming on the pay-per-view on the weekend there, or what do you think?
You know, I can't honestly say that I felt Miz was going to cash it in at the Elimination Chamber, but I knew something was up when he did that promo on Raw. In fact, if it were up to me and I were the one writing the show, I would have actually had him do the promo he did on Raw where he said he's taking himself out of the chamber. Everyone look at him like, oh, you know, this guy's an idiot for doing that. And then have him cash in Money in the Bank at the end of Raw, therefore rendering the chamber match now a number one contenders match and making him look like the ultimate genius in doing that. I love that throughout the years, Miz's character has consistently been booked, not so much, I'd say, as an opportunist, but as more of a thinking man's wrestler, trying to outsmart the people around him. Because let's face it, Miz is not the biggest. He's not the most technically sound. For all of his gifts on the microphone and whatnot, he's not someone that, in the eyes of the fans, is someone that they believe can run roughshod through the entire roster. But I do like that he represents an intellectual of a character. And so, yeah, the cash-in, I was all for it. I was glad to see, most of all, that the Money in the Bank regained some of its credibility because we've seen far too many failed cash-ins. And I like The Miz when it comes down to it. I mean, I've known The Miz, for a long time. I had the privilege of meeting him back when he did one of his first dark matches in Montreal, when he was teaming with, I forget the guy's name, but they were going to get called up as a tag team. Worked a dark match here in Montreal. I met him after the show. He was a total gentleman. Met him a few years later at an airport. He offered me tickets to the show that night, which I already had tickets to it. So I kind of got a bit of a soft spot in my heart for The Miz. And I was glad to see him finally be able to climb his way back up to being WWE champion. And I don't think it's going to be a long reign, but it's still good to see someone who has been such an asset to the WWE, both in the ring and out of it, get rewarded for all of his years of hard work.
I couldn't agree with you more. So, Mike, let me throw it over to you then. Jeremy doesn't think it's going to be a long reign. I tend to agree with that. Where do you think The Miz goes here? Where does he fit in with WrestleMania? And who's going to be in that title match at WrestleMania if it's not going to be The Miz?
I'm having a hard time deciding where he's going to fit at WrestleMania. I don't think it'll be the main event spot, though. I do think, as much as I like that they're getting Miz his time in, put the title on him, I'm loving it. But what I love the most is they're using this to get Bobby Lashley over. Nobody deserves it, in my mind right now, more than Lashley, except for, we've talked about this on the show before. You know me, I wanted Big E in this spot. But if it's not going to be Big E, I'm loving that. I'm loving Lashley. We discussed this on our big year-end show, how I've loved everything they've done with the Hurt Business. I'm loving what they're doing with Lashley. And to have him come out and just beat the fuck out of Drew McIntyre after that match was just beautiful. Loved the whole thing. It actually made a subpar pay-per-view worth watching.
What a difference a year makes. Hey, gentlemen, this time last year, Bobby Lashley was making out with Lana. And now we're talking about a main eventing WrestleMania. All the WWE haters out there, and they deserve a lot of slack for their booking over some periods of time. But what a way to rejuvenate this guy. I did not think I would be interested in Bobby Lashley again. I thought they killed him. They buried him. He was jobbing to, I think, Aleister Black in 3 minutes at WrestleMania last year. I'm all for maybe a Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre. I'm hearing Brock Lesnar maybe. The sky's the limits for what they could do with WrestleMania now. And I think Lashley's the guy that they should run with.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I got to say, I've been on the Bobby Lashley bandwagon since 2007. I still remember Great American Bash, Bobby Lashley versus John Cena.
Yeah.
And, I know you guys are big wrestling fans. I know you're from the Toronto area, more or less. I don't know if you guys were at the same show that took place at the arena there in Toronto. The name escapes me. Was it Scotiabank Place? Or
it's Scotiabank now. There was Air Canada Center at the time.
Yeah, at Scotiabank Place. There was a show leading up to that rivalry with Cena and Lashley. Were you guys at that show? Either one of you?
I don't think I was at that one.
I don't think so.
You might have been in Montreal at the time, right, Mike? Back then,
I was living in Montreal in 2007. Yeah.
Okay, so I was there in Toronto at that show. And they had a main event where it was Cena and Lashley against Shane McMahon, the Great Khali, and Umaga.
Oh, okay, I was at that show. Yeah. I was there.
So you might remember, and fans who watched it on TV, Cena, as per usual, was getting booed out of the building, especially in Canada.
Yeah.
And the people were so behind Lashley. And what most people didn't see was when that show went off the air, they had that moment in the ring where they went face to face, and everyone was cheering for Lashley. And then Cena turned his back. Lashley hit him with the spear, grabbed the belt, place went nuts. Huge pop. And then the Great American Bash came around. I'm expecting, okay, we're going to get a new champion here finally. And unfortunately, Lashley came up short in that match.
Yeah, it's the classic WWE. They never strike when the iron's hot. And
Exactly.
That's the perfect guy we're talking about today a little bit later with Daniel Bryan. I think they've missed the boat with him a lot over the years too. I'm with you, man. Lashley, he was ready back then.
I was on the Lashley bandwagon then. I thought he could have easily been given the keys to the city, been WWE champion, and carried that belt, right through for the next 10, 15 years. Lo and behold, here we are again. And I think he's at the top of his game. You guys might not know this, but I've actually been in the ring with Bobby Lashley.
Nice.
Yeah, I did. I wrestled in Barrie, Ontario, actually. I had a match.
Okay.
Me and RJ City took on Bobby Lashley and Harry Smith in the main event of the wrestling. So I've been in there with Lashley. More importantly than that, I spent that weekend driving him around. We stayed at the same hotel together, got to know him. And this guy is as legit in the ring as he is out of it. He has an extensive MMA record, a better MMA record than Brock Lesnar. Yeah. In fact, I think he's got the best MMA record of any active competitor in professional wrestling right now.
Yeah, it would be him or Hager probably, and I think he's got Hager beat by a bunch of matches, right?
Hager just got started.
Yeah.
So Lashley, he has the legit credentials. He would have done the Olympics. Unfortunately, there was a tragic story that he had told me about where he was involved in a bank heist where he was just at the bank and guys came in and guys pulled out guns and Lashley dropped to the ground, blew out his knee, blew out his knee, missed the Olympics because of that. And found his way into professional wrestling. Not a lot of people know that story about Bobby Lashley.
Wow, I did not know that either.
Just getting back on track. I mean, I've loved Lashley right from the start. And if this were to happen, if he were to win the WWE Championship from The Miz, which I do feel it's going to happen, I tell you, it's going to be a joyous occasion. An angel's going to get its wings when that happens because it's been long overdue. He should have been the man ages ago. And now, hopefully, WWE does the right thing. If you're listening, do the right thing. Put that belt on Bobby Lashley.
I think
I really love hearing that story because I got to say I am the opposite of you. I wasn't on the bandwagon all those years ago. I was the guy saying, you know what, he's just this overgrown big guy with no charisma. And even when he went to TNA, I hated him in TNA. But all of a sudden, when you put him in this group with MVP, and you put Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander beside him, all of a sudden something happened, something clicked, and all those years of me not believing in Bobby Lashley just disappeared. You said it best, Jeremy, when you said that he is at the top of his game right now. I am seeing a Bobby Lashley I didn't know existed 10 years ago. This guy, this is not the Bobby Lashley I thought we were watching. This guy, he is a WrestleMania main eventer. And if they don't put him in that spot in a couple weeks, they are definitely, like Tyler said, missing the boat on this one.
See, I think that when Lashley came back to WWE, he was already ready to be that person. And they just kind of booked him into obscurity. Because remember, he came in and he had that series with Roman, beat Roman clean as a sheet on pay-per-view. Yeah. And he said, I want to walk up to Brock Lesnar, look him in the eye, shake his hand, and say, I'm looking forward to stepping in the ring with you. And then for some reason, they pulled the rug out from under him and from under all the fans, because we should have got that match of Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley. Now, like I said, they've given him a great build. You know, if it were up to me, I even had this idea. I don't know if I said it when we did the circle debate with Tyler, but with Goldberg coming back, my thought was, you know, I hate the fact that they put Goldberg and Drew McIntyre. To me, that match did not make any sense from day one. The story didn't make sense. The match was whatever. I would have said they should have had Goldberg come back and face Bobby Lashley for the U.S. title, the first championship that Goldberg won. Now imagine the momentum. If Bobby Lashley steamrolls through Goldberg, then goes on to do what he did the last couple of weeks there, destroying Riddle, destroying Braun Strowman, everyone in his path, setting up for him to go and take the WWE title from a vulnerable champion in The Miz. I think they kind of missed the step by not doing that. Again, I don't claim to be clairvoyant or anything, but I could see that the way Lashley was going, they had big plans for him. And like I said, the bottom line is it's long overdue. I don't care how he gets the belt, but he deserves it. And I will be probably happier than anyone when he gets that 1, 2, 3 and becomes WWE champion. Finally.
Yeah. And the one blessing about him not fighting Lesnar a couple of years ago there, if you look at the pay-per-view matches Lesnar had that year, Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, he beat them all in 6 minutes and they were terrible, you know? So Lashley kind of avoided that. And now we could have this fresh matchup if they do Brock. It's going to draw, right?
I want to see it.
Before we move into talk about you some more, just because you've already given us so much awesomeness, I want to ask you about our fellow Canadian Edge, him and Roman Reigns going into WrestleMania. Is this the right match? Is that the match you want to see? Or is it Edge and McIntyre maybe something that you were looking at?
No, I had no interest in Edge and McIntyre. I think that Edge needs a strong villain to work with. And no one's been kept stronger than the Tribal Chief. You know, he runs SmackDown. He runs the island of relevancy, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, he's been decimating guys left and right over on the SmackDown brand. Drew McIntyre, you know, he's no slouch. He's had a lot of good matches. He's definitely getting things done on the Raw side. But you can't have, you know, two good guys going at it. You can't have, you know, Captain America and Thor going in there and fighting each other. It's not going to sell as a movie. So that's why I'm happy to see Edge over on SmackDown. And I personally, the match, I'm sure it's going to be great. But I'm more excited for the promos because Roman has finally found his step on the mic, which has been a big weakness of his for a long time. And I personally believe that Edge's biggest strength is actually his mic work, is his promos. You know, he's had a fantastic career as a wrestler. He looks great. But really, when I think of Edge, I think of when he won King of the Ring and he was in there with, you know, guys like Billy Gunn and like ripping on them, ripping on just about everybody and as the ultimate opportunist. I'm looking forward to the match build and the promos between him and Roman and him and Heyman especially.
I couldn't agree more, man. I don't know what we're going to get from the match. I think it's going to be decent. I don't think it's going to be something that we're talking about in 15 years from now, but I think it's going to be decent. What we might be talking about 15 years from now is the build. I think this has the potential to be one of those great WrestleMania builds. Tyler and I talk about it all the time that we think it's the long, slow build is a lost art. It's gone. So I do wish this started a few months ago, but the weeks that we have leading into it, I think are going to be really good. And, you know, with Edge showing up wherever he wants, he's been showing up in every show. So if he continues to do that, and then, you know, not only where Roman's going to be, but he could show up next week on NXT to talk shit about Roman. He could talk, you know, he could just show up wherever he wants, and people are going to listen because you want to hear what Edge has to say. And we are finally at a spot where we want to hear what Roman Reigns has to say. Yeah. And it's one of those special things because usually you put somebody with Paul Heyman and you're thinking, okay, good. Now he's got this mouthpiece. But Roman doesn't really need that mouthpiece right now. He's doing the work. He's doing the job. He's doing it properly. We're buying it. The people booing him now were booing him for the right reasons, finally.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys touch on Edge's mic work too, because that was the one thing I was so angry about coming into the Royal Rumble is they announced him the week before the Rumble, and I didn't get 3 weeks of Edge talking about why he wants his belt back and coming back from the injury. Like, I was furious about that. And the other thing I'm hoping that we get to see on this is I think there's still a pay-per-view left. Fastlane's coming up, correct? I would love to see the Uso brothers face Edge and Christian if they're all cleared and good to go, or at some form, maybe even after WrestleMania to keep that program going a little bit. You give me
Jimmy
Edge and
cleared
Christian.
or no?
I don't know if Jay's cleared or not yet. If
he said he was cleared.
If he's clear, give me the Usos and Edge and Christian to keep this build going. I want to see Edge and Christian team one more time, and it makes sense right now.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see that too. And I mean, I'm a very big fan of Christian. I think Christian, right before he retired, Christian was probably the best in-ring worker in WWE. At the time where people were talking about, guys like CM Punk being the best in the world. And I would watch Christian. I'm like, no, I'd say Christian's the best in the world. And maybe I'm a little biased. I mean, I've always liked Christian a little bit more than Edge, despite the fact that, I've met Edge tons of times. I met Edge when I must have been like 12 or 13 years old the first time I met Edge. He's literally the first wrestler I ever met. And then I probably met him a good 10 times since then. He always likes to tell this story about how I was in Boston. I think there was a pay-per-view. I think it was Armageddon. Was happening in Boston. And I just went with my friends to watch. I traveled to a lot of pay-per-views. Like I'm actually a very big super fan. It's something that not a lot of people know. I just started sharing that with a lot of the wrestling world, these podcasts I do. But I was a big super fan. I was the kind of guy who, me and my buddies, we'd go to the airport to meet the wrestlers. We would go to the same hotels where they're staying. And it helped me out because I got to meet a lot of these guys. Edge actually pulled in Boston the night he won the title from, I think it was a triple threat with Batista and someone else. It was the night that Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder debuted as the Edgeheads.
Yeah, okay,
and he won the title. And I saw him pull into the back of the hotel, and I went to go see him, and he's like walking, and then I'm walking behind him, and then he's walking a little bit faster, and so I'm walking up to him, and I'm just like, what's wrong with this guy? Has Edge become a jerk all of a sudden? I've already met him like 6-7 times before this, and he gets to the door, and the door doesn't open, and then I'm like, hey Edge, and he turns around, and he's like really scared, and I'm like, hey, can I get a picture with you? And there's some fans that want to meet you out front. And then he's like, yeah, sure, as long as you don't hurt me. Like, he straight up thought I was going to mug him. He thought that I was like someone from the Boston area. I was going to mug him right there.
What the hell?
And what's even funnier about that is fast forward to maybe 2 years later, I'm doing a WWE tryout in Florida at FCW. And Edge is one of the keynote speakers that's coming there to talk to people, tell us his story, answer questions, yada, yada. After it's done, he and I get into a discussion, and he's looking at me, and he's like, you look familiar. And I'm like, yeah, we met tons of times. We met, and he's like, no, I remember. It was in Boston when you snuck up on me. And this has been a thing between me and Edge every time I've seen him. I've probably seen him another 3-4 times after that, saw him at TV, and it's always, you were the guy in Boston sneaking up on me. He was, pissing his pants thinking that he was about to get mugged in the middle of South Boston.
That's hilarious.
Thank God.
From a personal level, it's funny. We kind of have something in common now. You say the first wrestler you ever met was Edge. First wrestler I ever met was Christian, and it should have also been Edge. My very first indie show ever was in '98, and the main event was the Suicide Blondes versus the Bushwhackers. And Sexton Hardcastle was out with a torn rotator cuff. So Andrew Test Martin was the other Suicide Blonde that night. So I didn't get to meet Edge for another few years. But the very first wrestler I ever met was Christian. So that's kind of funny to me.
I think this is kind of a good time to kind of switch over and start talking about your career then, Jeremy, because, the first question I want to ask is, I was going to ask if you're a fan growing up. Obviously, you've answered that. So who are some of your favorites growing up? Who are some of the guys that kind of you watch and you're like, man, like I want to do this?
Man, when I first started watching wrestling, this is like around 93, 94. My guy was always Bret the Hitman Hart.
Yeah.
First match I ever saw, Bret Hart and Blake Beverly. I feel like I've said it hundreds of times now, but that's literally the first ever wrestling match I watched, and it made me want to watch every single week. I remember, being a big fan of, Brett, being a big fan of the 1-2-3 Kid, Tatanka. These were the guys. These were the top baby faces when I started watching, and they were the guys I'd look for every week. From there, roll into the next era, the Attitude Era. I love The Rock. I love Chris Jericho over on the WCW side. Those were my two favorite guys. When Jericho came over to WWE finally, that was amazing. And then, just as wrestling progressed, there'd always be, other guys that would catch my attention. I grew to become a really big fan of Chris Benoit. I thought that, his in-ring style, it just looked so legit and so vicious and violent. And I love that. I love all styles of wrestling. I respect all styles of wrestling, but I really love, the Chris Benoit, the vicious, hard hitting, that kind of wrestling is really what I enjoy watching. So, like Ruthless Aggression era, SmackDown, Kurt Angle, Benoit, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, that era, even John Cena. These were the people I would enjoy watching on a weekly basis. And it was right around that time, the Ruthless Aggression era, where I decided, I'm going to wrestle. I mean, it was always in my head that, I'm going to become a wrestler. That was always my thing. I was the kid in school where, talk about your future career. And it's like, I'm going to be a wrestler. I'm going to be the guys I see on TV. I'm going to be Brett. But, that was around the time, the Ruthless Aggression era, where I actually went to wrestling school, went to, Jacques Rougeau's wrestling school here in Montreal, and never looked back ever since.
So I want to get into... Hold on, Mike. Wait, before we get to Jacques Rougeau, because I know you want to hear all about Jacques Rougeau, Mike. I'm going to throw it to you in a second. I just got to follow up then. You just said that you've been a super fan your whole life growing up. You have any of these cool little moments for yourself, kind of I call them holy shit moments, where you're in the locker room and you look over and you're with a guy like Tatanka, or you're with a guy does the inner fan in you still come out with moments like that? I know you have to keep it cool and stuff back there, but do you ever take a step back and be like, man, this is so cool that I'm working with these guys that I watched growing up now?
Well, the way I look at it is I'm on the same level now. Once you start, working on shows with these guys, been in the ring with so many of them, you become a peer. You're not a fan. I mean, I never stopped being a fan, but you become a peer to them. So I always say, I've never felt intimidated by a wrestler. In fact, the only person in the wrestling business that I met that I felt a sense of intimidation to was Vince McMahon. The first time I met him. Second time I met him, I was, happier than a pig in mud. I was there. We're posing in a picture together. I'm pointing at him. We're having a good time. And that's Vince McMahon. He's a billionaire. I always say I have kind of like a personality defect where I don't know what fear really is. And sometimes, just I act like myself around people who others might want to, bow to and treat like they're something special, despite the fact that they put on their pants one leg at a time every morning, just like we do. But the only time I could say that there was a sense of apprehension, or you call it fandom or whatever it might be, but it was Vince McMahon, because it's the one person that you need to impress in the wrestling world if you want to work for the WWE, which at that time, that was my only goal. But I will tell you a fun little anecdote, which was the first time I met another wrestler I was a huge fan of, which was Shane Helms, aka the Hurricane. I was a fan of his since WCW, when he was Sugar Shane Helms, won the Cruiserweight title, then became the Hurricane. I was a big fan of that. And I even, as a kid going to shows, I even, dressed up like the Hurricane. I had the mask on, and I made a costume and everything. And the first time I worked a show with him was here in Montreal. But because of the way the show was being run, I think my match was maybe right before his, and he was also doing a meet and greet. So I didn't get the chance to talk to him or anything. And so I really didn't get a chance to say hi or anything, despite the fact that I was such a big fan of his. Fast forward to maybe 2 years later, I'm on a show in somewhere in Rhode Island. It could have been Providence. It could have been, I always like to be specific with my town names, but I mean, you can go on cagematch.com or whatever it is and probably find what show it was. But it was for a company called XWA in Rhode Island. And Hurricane's working Todd Hansen on that show. He's Ivar from the Viking Raiders.
Okay.
And they have their match, and I'm in the main event, which the main event is a battle royal, or a Royal Rumble. So before my match and after his, there was a good enough gap. He happened to go over to the curtain and start watching. He's standing by me. He asked me, "Oh, how's this match going?" We start making a little bit of small talk. And I say to him, we kind of worked on a show together in Montreal about 2 years ago. And, he remembered the show and whatnot. And I said, I'm really sorry I didn't get a chance to say hi to you when you were there. But, I was a big fan of yours growing up. He started telling me this story about how he grew up in North Carolina and was a huge fan of the Rock and Roll Express. And he's like, man, I remember I was such a big fan of the Rock and Roll Express. I used to go to the shows dressed like them. I had jackets with tassels on and, and he's telling me all this stuff. And he's like, then I remember the first time I got to ref one of their matches. So I was just starting out in the business and I was a ref and I ref their match. And it's like, by the time it was done, it was like, wow, I didn't even get a chance to talk to them or anything. And I'm like, that's so funny because that was like me and you. Like I used to go to shows dressed up as you. And then we're on a show together and I don't even get the time to say hi to you. And we strike this big friendship, he and I, from there. Then he saw me in the Rumble and, I didn't even know he's watching it, but like I'm in there and it was a thing where to me it was kind of weird because I got booked just to do a Royal Rumble. And I got to go to the final of it. And it was, it was a really well structured. I was in there with David Starr, with Ivar, really talented wrestlers. And at the end, I'm just going back to the locker room and he comes up to me and he's like, hey, I saw you in there in the Rumble. Man, your stuff looked good and stiff. You look so stiff in there. And I'm like, well, it was all safe. And then one of the other guys I was working with was like, yeah, he didn't hurt me. It's all safe. He's like, oh, good. Now I know I can work with you. Okay. So I thought that was a pretty cool compliment. So that's like, my story with Shane Helms with Hurricane. Always said it's a match that I hope I'll get. I think he's an agent in WWE now. So the likelihood of that happening, who knows? But that's my one little, I guess, fandom kind of story there. And I thought it was cool because he had the same kind of story with the Rock and Roll Express. You never know who you inspire in this. Who knows? Maybe there'll be people down the line who will say they saw a Jeremy Prophet match and that made them want to be a wrestler. So.
Absolutely. So, Mike, I know you want to get in on some Jacques Rougeau talk here.
I am dying to ask a couple questions here. I got to preface this, Jeremy. I've been excited to talk to you ever since Tyler told me that you studied under the Jacques Rougeau school. And here's why. This is the reason.
Yep.
I spent a good quarter of my life living in Montreal. And I'll never forget the day my father and I are just perusing. We're walking through this old fucking flea market. And I find this wrestling ring in the back of the flea market. So what the fuck is there a wrestling ring in the back of a flea market for? And it's got this little sign that says Jacques Rougeau School of Wrestling. And I laughed. I thought it was a work. There's no way people are training in the back of a fucking flea market. And even though it said on the sign, don't jump in the ring, I'm a fucking mark. I jumped in the ring. And it must have been the stiffest ring I've ever been in my fucking life. And I've been in a good handful of rings. I've never, ever, I took one bump and I thought I broke my fucking back. So years later, I'm like, and I spent years saying there's no one ever is going to come out of that fucking school and do anything because there's no way you can learn in that. And of course, now we know the names, El Generico, Kevin Steen. Now I know Jeremy Prophet and so many more. I can't believe it happened. So I got to know what it was like training under Jacques Rougeau, but in that school. What was it like for you the first time you found out you were training in a flea market?
To me, I don't discriminate. So to me, I didn't know what wrestling training school was supposed to be like. To me, it didn't matter the where, it didn't matter the when, it just mattered that, I had a place that I could train. So yeah, one of the things I can tell you is that ring. Yeah. I've wrestled in a boxing ring. You can see a famous match I did with Coco Beware on YouTube where I beat his old decrepit ass all over a boxing ring for a good 10, 12 minutes. Man looked like he's going to pass out, have a heart attack, and fall into a diabetic fat coma. But anyways, other than that boxing ring, I think that the ring I trained in was the stiffest, most unforgiving ring I've ever been in. But it's a good thing because I feel that prepared me for anything else. So, I can tell you, I went through a lot of pain. You have to adjust your body to bumping. It's one thing I explain to people is that, you got to develop a callus to it. And that's why the more you wrestle, the more frequently, the better off you are. If you do try to do like, the Undertaker and do 1 or 2 matches a year, as we've seen in his documentaries, it's hard for the body to adapt to that sudden large amount of punishment. So that ring made it easier to work in any other ring. But there would be weeks where I'd be walking around with a limp. And it's the only time in my career, I would say, is in the early going where I questioned, is this for me? Because I kind of thought it was normal that you're always in that kind of pain. And I'm watching shows and seeing guys doing swantons off the top and just taking full bumps to the ring. So I thought every ring was as hard as the one I trained in.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I wouldn't have had it any other way because, that's what toughens us up. Just like us being Canadians, living in this cold weather all the time, it makes us durable. Not like those pansies down south, where the weather is always nice. They don't know a thing about shoveling, about snow tires. Like, that's what separates the men from the boys when it comes down to it.
There you go. Okay, so I got to ask, when you're working in this school, how hands-on is Jacques? Do you have other trainers, or are you working straight with Rougeau himself?
Yeah. So I'm going to shoot straight with you on my experience, which I've heard a lot of different things about a lot of other people's experiences, but this was my experience. So when I first came to the school, I feel like it was around November. It was November. No, it was like around September 2003. And Jacques had a show in December, a Christmas show that he was putting up. So Jacques, most of his attention was on that show because the guys would practice their matches and just pretty much perfect it. It was Cirque du Soleil, as he calls it. So it wasn't really wrestling. It was choreographed artistry, whatever you want to call it. So most of Jacques' attention before the show was on the guys who were on the show. Okay. So my first trainer for the first 3 months, 3-4 months, let's say, was a guy by the name of Eric Mastrocola and another guy by the name of Tank. Mostly wrestling here in Quebec. Eric had done some stuff with WWE, some dark matches and stuff. They were the guys who showed me, my first bumps, how to run the ropes, how to take a corner, how to take a body slam, really the basic of all basics. After that show, Jacques took a more hands-on role. And by his own admission, he said, I feel like I haven't been giving you guys enough attention. I want to get you guys up to par with the time I have between now and my summer shows that are coming up. Because the next show I think was scheduled for like April, May, which would end up being my debut. So Jacques was much more hands-on. He would always make sure to run us through the drills during that time. And that pretty much continued right through to the next year. And I got put in the ring pretty fast. I mean, look, I started in September and my first match was in I'm pretty sure it was April. I mean, April's my birthday month. And I remember it kind of coincided with that. And not to say I was any kind of a prodigy or anything like that, but one guy ended up leaving the school, just left wrestling altogether. They needed someone to fill that spot. And out of the 10 guys that were training the new group, I was the one that they chose. So I appreciate that they had faith in me. I guess I was a quick learner. I mean, I hear all these horror stories about people, like yourself, they go in, they take their first bump, knocks the wind out of them. I had heard that story so many times. I just kind of said, look, that's not going to be me. So I went in and, tackled it head on, took the first bump. It was like nothing. I mean, it hurt, but I braced myself for it, knowing it was going to hurt, because I'm a firm believer that there's no greater weapon than a prepared mind. And, being ready, proper strategy, you can overcome anything that stands in your way. So I was ready for that and applied myself. And no matter how many times I fell down or did something wrong, I said, I'm going to take all the time it takes to learn that technique. I would drill it. I would go home and I would go over the same kinds of things. I'd take the cushions off of my parents' sofas and I'd put them on the ground and I would do the same, the bumps, the rolls, the hip tosses, all those kinds of things. I would perfect it so that I would come back the next week and then I would kill it. Not everyone has that in them. That's kind of something that you can't teach. It's being a perfectionist and being willing to hold yourself accountable. So when it comes to Jacques, he wasn't present at first, but then very much took a hands-on role. And even right down to my last days at the school, where he wanted me to sign a contract with him. Obviously, I don't think it would have been a valid contract of any kind, but he was just scared that a lot of his guys were going to leave, a lot of his best talents. Yeah. And he said to me, and this is how I parted with him, was he said, I want you to sign this contract because I want to teach you everything I know. I see a lot of potential in you, and I want to teach you more. I want to make you a bigger star. And to me, I was just like, yeah, but I want to wrestle. So, my future, I don't see it being the top star of Jacques Rougeau's Cirque du Soleil. I see my future as being the top star in the WWE. And he respected that. So I told it to him like a man. I didn't, go behind his back and spread rumors and say all kinds. I just went to him as a man because I never saw Jacques as anything special. Like, I mean, yeah, he wrestled in WWE, he was Intercontinental Champion and all that. But at the end of the day, I saw him as a human being. I saw him the same way I see a teacher in school. So I just went to him man to man and said, unfortunately, despite the fact that I respect you and everything you've showed me, I really want to take my game to the next level. No disrespect to you, just I want to have a career in this and I want to learn more and I want to learn from other people. And he accepted it. No issues, and sent me on my way. No ill will, no bad blood. I do all these interviews. People ask me about him. I got nothing but good to say because he never mistreated me, not a day of my life.
I'm really happy to hear that. I do want to return. Eventually, I want to return to what you were saying about putting the work in on your own. I have a couple questions about that. But before I let Tyler actually get a word in edgewise, I do want to ask why the Rougeau School in the beginning. Did you grow up in Montreal? Is this why this was an in?
Oh yeah, I lived my whole life in Montreal, born and raised, with very little exceptions. I mean, I've lived in different parts of Quebec, but I'm a Montreal boy. Pretty much my whole life. Went to school here.
Well, I'm sorry then. So I'm a big Senators fan, and they beat the Habs tonight, so I'm feeling extra high tonight. But I was born, not raised in Montreal, but I was born in Montreal, left for a few years, and then returned for 10 years. So I get it, and there is this feeling of wrestling history when you're there. Mm-hmm. You just know, and it doesn't matter. You can go to the smallest, the smallest indie show, and it feels huge in Quebec. It really does. It's not like any other show, not like any show I've been to in Ontario or anywhere else. Quebec, Montreal, especially for me, has that thing to it, that feel to it. Yeah. The 30 people in a gym feels like a bigger crowd than the 2,000 at a WWE house show in Toronto.
Yeah. Something else with Jacques Rougeau too is people don't realize how over he really was in Montreal. We know him, the mainstream knows him from the Mountie and the Quebecer and all that stuff. This guy was drawing huge numbers with his brother Raymond, against the Garvins back in the day. Like he was, he's had a big house with Hulk Hogan in the late 90s. Like, he was a really big deal in Montreal. And it's nice to hear a different take on Jacques because, you always hear the stories from, the famous one where him and Dynamite Kid had their heat. And then the most recent one with guys like Kevin Owens. So it's nice to hear a different side of Jacques, because I think that guy doesn't get the respect he deserves in the Canadian scene.
Well, you see, my take on that with guys like Kevin, and I get asked about Kevin a lot, but you got to keep in mind that Kevin was really young at that time. Kevin's only 2 years older than me. So, I mean, I went there, I was maybe, 17. Kevin would have been 19. So, Kevin then is not the Kevin of now. So you can imagine Jacques saying these kinds of things to a 19-year-old, telling him, promises of getting him dark matches and tryouts and these kinds of things if he stays loyal. Plus, you got other promoters in his ear offering him opportunities, more opportunities. He's a big wrestler. I don't know Kevin that well. That's another misconception. People don't realize that there's a 2-week overlap of Kevin leaving Jacques Rougeau's school and me training. There's 2 weeks where we were both there. That's it. Might have shaken his hand once. That's about it. The most I know Kevin from is the times we crossed paths on the independents. We've been in the ring and wrestled. We were, I think, partners on 2 occasions, and we were opponents on another 2 occasions. That's about it. So, there's really not a lot of crossover between he and I, although there are some infamous stories and interactions that we have. But looking at it from just a purely sociological point here, Kevin was 19, much like me, wanting to wrestle, just wanting to be able to make a name for himself. And Jacques wouldn't allow him to wrestle, wouldn't allow anybody to wrestle for these other independent promotions. He kind of allowed guys for a while. and then took it away. Obviously, Jacques wanting to protect his investment, because if you can see Jacques guys on shows where you're paying, $10 a ticket, why are you going to pay $40, $50 a ticket to watch them on Jacques' show just because that's Jacques' show? So again, I understand the businessman side of it. I understand especially the wrestler side of it. And I think that's why a lot of these guys hold a lot of ill will. Not to say that I was any more, savant or, anything like that. Just, I'm a common sense person. I feel like if I have one superpower, it's that I have a black belt in common sense. So I understood where Jacques was coming from. That's how I knew how to approach him about it. And it's why, there's no ill will from me towards him and vice versa to this day. In fact, I do hope to get him in an interview someday. And I do think that day will come.
Yeah, that'd be great to hear. And you guys do great work. Give your guys' podcast a plug too, where we can hear that.
Oh yeah, Jofo in the Ring. I mean, you can find us pretty much anywhere, but YouTube, Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. We always have a new episode. We got about 6-7 episodes in the can with a lot of great people, and you'll get a bit of everything with the show. You'll get wrestling news, you'll get great interviews, you get a little bit of comedy between me and Kyle, which I kind of like because you guys kind of seem to take shots at each other too. So I think that also kind of, breaks up the boring monotony of the whole thing. People don't want to see the 6 o'clock news. They want to be entertained. And I always love it when a podcast can do that, much like you guys. So yeah, you can see me on Jofo in the Ring. Follow us on Twitter at Jofo in the Ring, Instagram, all those things. Just look for Jofo in the Ring, Jofo. It's just our effing opinion, and I'm sure you'll love it.
Absolutely. And so while we're on the topic of guys like Kevin Owens, you said the big misconception is that they think that you guys know each other a lot and you don't. What about another name that's come up about the same time, and that's Sami Zayn? Any interaction with him at all? What's your relationship, if any, with him?
Well, unlike what he said before, he did not train with us. He was trained by a guy named Patty the Kid in the backyard. And I guess all things considered did pretty well for himself. I still feel like he's a backstabber, a liar, a charlatan. In regards to me, I don't know what he's like in his personal life, but my few experiences with him, haven't been outstanding. I mean, he's a guy who I faced once. It was a tag match, actually, him and Sexy Eddie against me and Kevin, ironically. Thought it was all right. We had a decent match. It was pretty good. It was a great main event. People were happy. I didn't mind the guy. But other than that, we didn't talk that much. I remember one time I met him outside of a WWE event. The event had just ended. I don't know if he was there or not, but we were kind of just outside the hotel where the wrestlers were here in Montreal. Had a pleasant conversation with him. And the next time I had seen him after all of this was literally on a show that I was trying out at, was at Raw in 2010, Raw and SmackDown. And the SmackDown in 2010, as I've told in many interviews, Billy Kidman and Jamie Noble went to him, and were 14 guys there, and they said, hey, we need a guy for a dark match with Alberto Del Rio. And they started throwing some names of some of us there. And I'm the closest possible person to him. I'm literally where the ring steps are. They're right where the ramp ends, where the barricades kind of go into like an L on each side.
Yeah.
And they mentioned me, and his response is, oh, well, I don't know him that well. He's kind of green. He's, all these things. I'm staring right at him. I'm not doing the whole thing because, again, I have a personality, man. I'm a bit of a loose cannon. And, I'm not doing the thing where it's kind of like, oh, I'm turning my back, but I hear him. No, I am staring as at him can be. Because maybe to my detriment, but I'm a very confrontational person. I love confrontation. I'm not the kind of person who shies away from that. I love confrontation. I love when people are agitated. I love that. I love throwing myself into the fire and walking out scathed or unscathed, because that's life. And yeah, he proceeded to more or less bury me. And it's funny because Kidman already knew how good I was from Florida, because I had done a week-long tryout in Florida, and those guys all loved me. But I just thought it was very low and reprehensible that he would do something like that, especially considering we're from the same place. And even when I had a bit of an altercation with Kevin, he said the same thing. He's like, and I know you have issues with Rami. I know he said some things about you. He told those guys that you were green. He confirmed everything that I already knew anyways. And he said that the reason that he did it was because he felt that if I were to have that opportunity, I'm trying to remember how he worded it exactly, because I don't want to misquote anybody, but that I would be too outlandish about it, that I would, whatever that means. It's a case of jealousy. is all it really is. And that's why I have zero respect for him. It's not something that like you're going to patch this up down the line, or we're going to see each other somewhere and we're going to be respectful and shake hands. Absolutely not. No handshake, no amnesty, no burying the hatchet, not ever. And I did see him. We did a show at Heavy Montreal, and he dipped quite fast when I caught sight of him, and he wanted no part of this. And believe me, you're not going to hear of any story of us, being somewhere together and there not being any kind of an addressing of that, any kind of a making of amends. We're not going to have any pictures of he and I shaking hands and laughing about it. I'm cool. I'm cool with holding a grudge. I think that it's actually an acquired skill to be able to hold a grudge, because too many people just want to let bygones be bygones, but there's a lot of weak people in the world. So, that's pretty much what it is when it comes down to him. I think that he's very much someone who is not like me, because I don't put knives in people's backs. I don't do that. If there's someone that's ahead of me, that just means I got to step up my game and work harder. It's not a case of I'm going to drag that person down so that I can justify in my own mind and sleep at night by saying that we're at the same level because of some, dirty, underhanded charlatanism. So when it comes down to it, yeah, I mean, he's someone I think very little of. Don't appreciate the fact that I've wasted your airtime in talking about him. But yeah, that's my true raw feelings when it comes down to it. And believe you me, you are not going to hear of anything positive of he and I down the line. This is not something that I'm okay with putting aside, because I wouldn't be happy with myself if I were to choose to ever forgive him or be okay with that.
I love it. We promised everybody last week a hell of an interview this week, and you were not disappointed, my friend. I want to kind of flip the switch a little bit then. We just talked about guys like Sami who were doing things to bring you down and to hurt you. Who are some people that kind of took you under your wing and started showing you the way to do this and were great helps to you?
There were a lot of people. I like to say that I'm a self-made man, but the truth is that in this business, no one is self-made. Everyone needs someone to hold the door open for them. Everyone needs someone to show them the way. And so I've had a lot of people who were good to me. People like Sylvain Grenier, who was one of the first ones after he had been released from WWE. He had his wrestling school. I told him, he gave this speech to a locker room at a show here in Montreal where he said, guys, I'm opening my wrestling school this Tuesday, and I'm inviting you all to be there because, quite frankly, you guys need it. I mean, I've seen you work, and you guys need it badly. So some of them got really offended. Some of them kind of laughed, whatever. I was the only one that I walked up to him and I said, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to be the first guy to show up on Tuesday. And I was the first guy to show up, fully expecting that I'm going to go right back to wrestling school. I'm going to pay him however much he wants because, like he said to me right after, he said, you may be the only smart one here because I'm the only guy here with John Laurinaitis' phone number and Terry Taylor's phone number, who were TNA and WWE at the time. And I showed up fully expecting to pay, fully expecting to go back to basics. I went in with a very humble attitude. He pretty much put me in charge of the new students who had never wrestled before, while he handled the ones who were more advanced. Never asked me for $1, and allowed me to be there, work closely with him, and learn exactly what WWE was looking for, and prepare me for the road that I had ahead of me with the tryouts and all of those things. So he was someone who's very helpful. Another person who was very helpful to me was Mike Bucci, Nova, Simon Dean. Yeah. Sylvain had booked him on one of his shows here in Montreal, and I was just walking out of a locker room. He was walking out of the adjacent locker room, saw me, and I'm just in my dress clothes, looking probably no different than I do now. And he just took a look at me and said, you have a really good look. Have you ever tried out with WWE? I'm like, no, but it's my goal. And he said, fine, get me an 8x10 of you, put all your information on the back. I will have it in WWE's hands by Monday. This was on a Friday. We were having this show. He called me on the Tuesday following, kept tabs on me, gave me tons of good advice when I went down to Florida. So he was very helpful. Another one who was also very helpful was Pat Patterson, who, him and Sylvain, very close, kind of have like a father-son relationship. The first time Pat Patterson ever saw me wrestle was on Father's Day, when he came to watch Sylvain wrestle in the main event of a show that I was also on. And it was funny because everyone's panicking because like, oh my God, Pat Patterson's here. We gotta step up our game. We gotta do better. Oh, I wish I knew. I would have gone to the gym and pumped up, or I would have went to tan, or everyone's freaking out in the locker room. I'm like, man, I don't care that Pat Patterson's here. I'm like, I'm just going to do what I do. I mean, like, I put out a product every time I'm in the ring that is always, scout worthy all the time. So I'm not going to stray from my game plan. I'm going to be me. And my opponent, who, thankfully he was an opponent that I've wrestled a couple of times, very comfortable with the guy. I would say he's someone I do really good matches with, except that he was super nervous and he's thinking of all the cool things he's got to pull out now in the match. And I'm telling him, just do what you normally do. If you try to do stuff you don't, odds are you're going to mess it up.
Yeah.
Yep.
And while there were a few flips and fumbles on his end, thankfully not on mine, we had a really good match. But after the show, I said, everyone's going to be going up to Pat. They're all going to be bothering him. I'm going to no sell it. I'm not going to go up to him and be like everybody else here. And sometimes people will knock me for trying to say, I'm above everyone. I hold myself above people. I'm a snob. I'm a whatever they want to say. And it's like, no, I just present a professional package is what I do. Because if you put yourself down to the levels of the people in the audience, you belong with the people in the audience. They're not, no one pays to see Clark Kent. They want to see Superman. So, if I decide I'm going to dress up really nice for a show, hey, maybe there's going to be a guy like Mike Bucci walking out of another dressing room and sees me and offers to get my stuff to WWE in 3 days' time. Why? Because I carry myself like a professional. It's going to rub some people the wrong way. But, there's a famous quote from R. Kelly where he says, and I'll make it more PG so it doesn't affect your monetization. But he says, there's 1 million people that hate me and there's 10 billion people that love me. And it's a mentality that I've always gone by, is that there are going to be haters. There are going to be a lot of haters if you're doing something right. But there's going to be a lot more people that love you and that can see that you're someone that they can do great business with. And so I've always carried myself like a professional. So I'm not going to be some kid running up to Pat Patterson, tugging on his coat and saying, hey, what'd you think of my match? What'd you think of my match? If he likes it, the stars will align and something will happen. But I'm not going to go and I'm not going to, force the takedown. All that to say, I'm standing by the ring. I'm collecting my merch and I feel someone come and put their hand on me. And I look and it's Pat Patterson. And I'm like, oh, hello, Mr. Patterson. Nice to meet you. And he says, yeah, nice to meet you too. I really liked your match. You really had a good match tonight. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. It means a lot to me coming from someone like yourself. It's my goal to work for the WWE. And he said, well, we have tryouts coming up. I would strongly encourage you to send your stuff. Based on what I saw, I'd strongly encourage you to send your stuff. I'm the kind of guy where it's like, hey, I don't need more than that. I went home, sent my stuff right away. It was about an hour's drive, hour and a half drive back home from the venue. Got home, found my best matches, pictures, wrote up a great bio, sent it off for their next tryouts in Florida. That's how I got my tryouts. And that was because of Pat Patterson, because of people, helping to pull the strings, helping to open the doors for me. And I mean, the more I think about it, I have so many of these stories. Like one of the things I always say is, we here in Canada, we don't have that same kind of scouting. We don't get to rub shoulders with VIPs that often that can actually help to get us to a better place so we can have a better life for ourselves and our families. And when I went to the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Amsterdam, New York, we're looking at 2012. I wrestled a match, tag match, nothing to write home about. And at that same show, Jimmy Snuka was there. He actually, and Jimmy Snuka had just recently had his leg amputated, and he actually walked backstage with assistants to come meet me because he really liked the match, really took a liking to me. But it was after that show that we went back to the hotel where everyone was staying. There's tons of VIPs there. And I happened to run into Fit Finlay. And I had been on a show with Fit Finlay in Barrie, Ontario, a couple months before that. He arrived late. I didn't get the chance to really interact with him. He had a seminar, but I had to get home, so I wasn't even able to stay for a seminar after the show. But then we started talking, and he's like, "Yeah, I got to see you at that show. You really have a great look." And we started talking about WWE, and he at the time was an agent, but he'd gotten let go. And he said, "I'm not there now, but I'm going back. And I'm always on the lookout for talent. And you really got a great look. I'd love to know if you can wrestle, because if the wrestling and the talking can match the look, there might be something for you." We kept in touch. I sent him some stuff. He actually helped get me my second set of tryouts in 2012. So there have been people who have helped me out along the way. And the sad part about it is that like a lot of them were from opportunities in the United States, because the scouting is just not here in Canada. You don't get to rub shoulders with people. You know, at that point, 2012, I had been in the business solidly for, I mean, doing the math there, about 8 years. 8 years of grinding in Canada, one average match in the States, right place, right time, leads to me getting a second set of tryouts. And that's the crazy thing about it, is that there are so many opportunities over there. Guys are getting opportunities thrown at them all the time. Here, we got to be 10 times as good with 1/10 of the opportunities, not even. So it's pretty frustrating. I try to stay positive about it, but it's really an epidemic. And it's a system that is more or less broken, and companies are ignorant to it. They're just totally ignorant. They think we have the same playing field as Americans, and we don't. And I'm living proof of it. I'm living proof that scouting is non-existent, because with the bar set as low as it is in professional wrestling right now, there's no good reason why someone with my merits and talents is not in a better place than here in the Great White North.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because it is something I was planning on asking about a little bit. And you know what? I want to circle back to that in 1 second, because there's a name I want to mention to you. I was on your Twitter last week, and I saw a nice tweet that you put out. And it said, I'm going to quote it here: "I'm a product of many great Canadians. Bret Hart was the inspiration. Jacques Rougeau was the trainer. Ron Hutchinson taught me the most." What exactly did you learn from Ron? How did you get in contact with Ron? And what's your relationship like with Ron? Because he's one of the best trainers in Canada.
I would say Ron is the best trainer in Canada, and the resume speaks for itself. You know, Edge, Christian, Trish Stratus, Gail Kim, Beth Phoenix, Johnny Swinger, you know, Joe Legend.
Yep.
It goes on and on and on. Ron is someone that I always knew about because of Edge's story. So, you know, before I was even a wrestler, I knew who Ron Hutchinson was, because he's the guy from the contest that Edge entered, and he trained him, and he trained all these other great Canadians. So I knew of his legacy without knowing him. I first met Ron Hutchinson in Welland, Ontario, in 2007. Happened to be backstage at a show for a promoter named Chuck Sims. RWI was his company, Rough Wrestling International, out of Welland, Ontario. And Ron was backstage. A bunch of us were kind of together and talking. But, you know, the funny part is that I didn't know who he was at the time. So I just thought, you know, he's another veteran wrestler there in the locker room. And I always respect the people who've come before me. I have a lot of respect for the old generation. And it actually is one thing that I really don't like to see, is a lot of times the younger generation, they feel because wrestling has changed and evolved so much that the old guys don't still have very practical knowledge. I'm the opposite. I'm a sponge. I can literally, I consume a lot of wrestling week to week, different kinds of wrestling, and I feel you can learn from all of it. You can learn from all wrestling, all generations, all wrestlers, no matter how successful or not. So we're kind of there. I don't even know that it's Ron. And we're talking, we're having a good time and everything. And it was only after that someone had told me, like, that was Ron Hutchinson. You know, fast forward to a few years later, and this was, you know, fairly early in my career, I get a message out of the blue one day from Ron Hutchinson saying, "Hey, I hear there's a wrestling show at this address. Do you know anything about it?" And I'm thinking, why would Ron Hutchinson message me? You know, I remember I met him a couple of years ago, but this is kind of random. So I wrote back, took a chance, and I said, "Well, I know where that show is happening, and if you want, I can, you know, come pick you up. We can go to the show together. You know, I'll be happy to go there." I'm like, "Hey, at worst, you know, I can learn from this guy. He's a legend." And he was like, "That sounds good. I'll be ready at this time, and you can come meet me." Met up with him, went to the show. We had a great time. Me, him, and another one of his students, former students, you know, went to the show, went out for drinks after. I don't drink, but he likes to drink. And, you know, we just had a great time. I mean, we must have been out till like at least like, you know, 3 a.m. when everything was closing around here. And then ever since then, we kept in touch. And he would be my go-to. If there was ever a difficult situation that I was facing in wrestling, he would be the person, you know, he would be like the Obi-Wan Kenobi to my Luke Skywalker.
Nice.
You know, and I'm the kind of person who, I don't get down. I don't go to a dark place. You know, I reflect on things and introspect. But whenever I would need to go to someone for a second opinion, or someone who just knows more, Ron was always my go-to. And, we always stay in touch. He's been my biggest mentor in wrestling. And, one of the greatest honors for me was he had a 27-year hiatus or something like that from wrestling, 25-year hiatus, hadn't wrestled. And then we end up on this tour in Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling for Emile Dupree. He's on the tour and he's in the process of writing a book, and he's doing this chapter about his comeback match. And he chose me to have the comeback match with. And you can see that match on YouTube, Jeremy Prophet versus the Masked Thunderbolt. The Masked Thunderbolt was the name that he wrestled under in Grand Prix Wrestling. Nice. And so we had that match. That was his first match in 25 years. And what a great match it was. I had a fantastic time getting in there with him. But the generational gap between how matches were back then and how they were now, it was something that was, I guess, very eye-opening for him. And I do believe that I brought the right tools to the table to be able to get the most out of that match, especially considering you can only imagine how much ring rust the person would have after that amount of time. But I said to him, I'm going to take care of you in there. We can do whatever you want. You want to do it the old school way where you're in one locker room, I'm in the other, we meet up in the ring. Fine by me. I had no apprehensions, no worries, because I was in there with someone, if I can borrow an expression, Ron Hutchison to me, he's more than just a teacher. He is simultaneously like my father, like my brother, and like my son. That's our relationship.
That's cool.
Vice versa. In that sometimes he's the father, sometimes I'm the father. Sometimes we're like brothers. Sometimes I'm his son, sometimes he's my son. And that's what's cool about the relationship that we have. One of my best friends, my biggest supporter, biggest ally, greatest mentor, person that if I had to, give someone a rifle to watch my back in the foxhole, Ron is going to be one of those people. There are very few other people I would say that about in wrestling. He, without a shadow of a doubt, I would gladly, he would never put a knife in my back. I would never put a knife in his. I trust him with my life. I would trust him with any of my possessions in this world. And he's someone I can't say enough good about. And he's definitely someone who, he's a legend. He's done a lot for this business, and he's a very humble man. Yeah. But he's helped to steer a lot of people on the right path. And I have so much respect, love, and admiration for him.
No, I'm glad to hear that praise too, because I just think he's a guy that kind of gets said, the guy that trained Edge. And I know there's so much more with him. I know he had a hell of an in-ring career. So it's nice to hear some more talk and praise about some people that know him firsthand, right? Mm-hmm. So another name, actually, before I get into another name that you do some work with, we've talked a lot about WWE dark matches and WWE work that you've done. Have you done any work with Impact Wrestling? Have you been in contact with them at all, or Ring of Honor or anything like that? Have you done some work with them at all?
Zero for Ring of Honor, and I would love to speak to them because I think they could use a few more Canadians in their company, as I've been saying many times over. I've wrestled a ton of guys there. I actually put out another tweet not that long ago responding to someone who mentioned, me and PCO maybe doing something in Ring of Honor. And I said, yeah, there's PCO, but there's tons of other guys that I've already wrestled and had awesome matches with. Guys like Matt Taven, like Dalton Castle, Vincent, Danhausen. Danhausen and I wrestled like a year ago. Tons of these guys. And I just think it would be a great fit because I know the lay of the land. I know the guys there, and I've wrestled a lot of them. They know what I bring to the table. Mm-hmm. I always say Jay Lethal was one of the best matches of my entire career. We had a match, the closest match I've ever had to my home. It was literally like 7 minutes from where I live. Not in my hometown, but just on the outskirts, but still about a good, 7 minutes from where I live. Jay Lethal and I went at it. A lot of my family was there, and it was such a fantastic match. And, Jay was such a gentleman, such a good guy. And it was one of the first times I'm in there with someone where I'm like, I'm going to raise the intensity level. And that's usually what I do. And sometimes my opponents, they melt in front of me. But Jay, he brought it. And the more I bring it, the more he'd bring it. It was such a great match. I would love to have that match again on a larger stage. And, even a guy like Matt Taven, you can see a great match between he and I from IWE in Maine. Great match that we had years ago. With everything we've learned and how much better we've become, I think we could do a great match even now. And, all those guys, I just, I feel like I was kind of part of their scene, in the New England states and the Northeast. I know the lay of the land there. And definitely they could use more Canadians in Ring of Honor. It doesn't make sense that you have more guys from Australia than you do Canadians when we're a hell of a lot closer to Baltimore, Maryland than Australia or the UK, or even guys from Mexico, or even guys from Texas, California, the Northwest. So what gives? We should have more Canadians there. I'm already on TV here on RDS, which is the French TSN, on a show that's shared with Ring of Honor. So, guys, you want to get the ratings up for your show here in Canada, you're looking at the ambassador of Canada, Mr. Canada himself here, who can help do that for you, who actually, speaks a clear Queen's English without a French accent, who can show up on your show, walk the walk, talk the talk, mix it up with these guys in the ring, and put a lot of eyes on the product, Canadian and internationally. That's my pitch to them. So, yeah, I don't know who their scouts are. I don't know who does their hiring, but clearly they've overlooked an entire country's worth of people. Same for a company like MLW, which, unless you want to talk about them, I'm not going to talk about MLW because, same thing, different company when it comes down to it. No Canadian wrestlers on the roster. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
I can only think of, I think they have Alicia Atout as their interview person, and that's
She's
the
not a
only
wrestler.
Canadian I can think of. And
Does
she's
she
not in the
wrestle?
ring. She's not in the ring.
Yeah,
I don't
she's a
get it.
journalist.
So, and this is something that I'm glad that we're talking about now, because I knew we were going to get back to it. Is it harder being on this side of the border to get over to the States? Like, what's the struggles that you have to face? You hear the horror stories about Tyson Dukes, for instance, was on our show, and he told us that just randomly out of the blue, he got stopped at the border and it cost him his NXT contract. Like,
Yep.
Why is it that we're having such a hard time getting over there? Is there anything you can kind of shed light on?
Well, it's simple. Why are a person from Mexico who tries to cross the border to go work in agriculture without a work visa? Wrestling is no different. A Canadian wanting to go work in the United States in wrestling on the independents, not even making money, you can't do that. Take it from a guy who's been stopped at the border maybe 100 times. Like legit, going through, coming back, all kinds of things. I've been stopped going to train, and I've actually been refused one time when I was going to train, and they're like, well, we know you're a wrestler, we've seen it online, and we think that there's a chance you're going to go there and wrestle, and if you do that, you're taking a job away from an American citizen who could have that spot instead of you. They've done everything short of cavity searching me when I go through. I've been fingerprinted. I've been, made to fill in things. I've been questioned. I was once put in a room with a young lady who was also being held in the same room with an assault rifle and tons of rounds. So, me, I'm just going to wrestle. But, they're putting me in the room with like hardened criminals and these kinds of things, searching through my phone, trying to find something that's going to say that I'm going there as an illegal worker. So this is the kind of scrutiny that we face every time we cross the border. It's a crapshoot, and I can tell you, more often than not, I am stopped than I'm allowed through without questioning. And people don't understand that. They don't understand that we are not appearing in major American independent feds, not because we're not good, not because they don't want to book us, but because of all that hassle, because we can't go and work legally without a work visa. Just to acquire a work visa, you got to go through a 3-step process. You got to put up the money. And if we're up to me, I'm not bragging. Don't turn this into, Jeremy's flaunting all the money he's got and whatnot. But, I've made a pretty penny in my life. I've got some good investments. I've in the time that I've not been wrestling on TV and on a big stage under the brightest of lights, I've been pretty smart with my money. If I could just throw money at this problem, I would gladly do it. In fact, I've gone on record and said, if there's a major company that wants to hire me, but y'all are too stingy to put up the money to get me into your country legally, I will put up all the money myself. I don't care. If there are other wrestlers you want to hire, I'm going on record, and you guys don't want to put up the money, I will put up the money. I will become the Royal Bank of Canada, the Royal Bank of Profit is what I'll call it. And I will put up the money just for the publicity, to be able to say, hey, this company was too stingy to pay for it. I'll be the benefactor. I would love to just throw money at this problem and make it go away. But it's not that simple. And by the way, I will add to that, I would have a decent interest rate on that. Obviously, they'd have to pay me back. It would need to be paperwork. But I would love the publicity from that, and I would love to be able to help advance careers, because it's not about the money. That's what people don't get. It's not that we're cheap, even though you're looking at 3 to 10 grand to do that, which to some is a hefty sum. To me, it's not, because to me, that's an investment. That's saying, I believe in myself that I will make this kind of money for the company that has enough faith in me to get me the work visa and feature me on their product. So it's a teardrop in the ocean to me. If it's three grand, 10 grand, whatever it may be, plus lawyer fees, all that BS. When it comes down to it, we can't just do that, because the company has to go to the American government, and to get an O1 visa, it literally says by definition, and if you don't believe me, I encourage you to look it up. O1 visa, exceptional performer. It needs to be justified that you can do whatever the job is better than an American citizen. So you need proof, you need newspaper articles, you need magazine articles, you need things that say that you are the best in your country, and that you are going to be a exceptional performer, a low impact on the labor force, and they still have to get it approved and scrutinized once that's done. That's why people get signed, and then they're in this waiting period before they actually can appear on whatever show and whatnot. So you need a major company to back you to go and make the ask. Get this. Like I said, 3-step approval process. If you don't get approved, you don't get your money back either.
Of course.
So then now they don't get it in the States. They think, oh, well, just go wrestle on the indies. We all know that if you wrestle for PWG or GCW or Evolve or CZW, you're going to get noticed, because they have big fan bases and they have scouting. And with the creation of NXT and the shift towards hiring people from the indies, because when I started, it wasn't indie guys getting hired. It was failed bodybuilders, football players that, tore their ACLs and their careers are over, failed athletes left and right, and bikini models and that kind of thing. So when it became, now we're hiring independent wrestlers, it kind of shut the door on us inadvertently, because we can't go wrestle for those companies. So they don't know who we are. They don't know our value, and they don't scout Canada. So we're kind of wrestling in this purgatory, going around in circles. I mean, with my accomplishments, the championships I've won, the shows I've appeared on, putting my actual talent and what I bring to the table on a microphone and appearance and in-ring ability aside, the merits that I have, if I had those same merits in the United States, I would definitely be able to name my price, and it'd be quite a hefty price. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes down to it, we're not being given those same opportunities. And if you saw my episode I did with Tyson Kidd, which dropped pretty much today on Jofo, even he wasn't aware, being in WWE as an agent, wasn't aware that this system has inadvertently shut out Canadians. Because the way it goes is, WWE before COVID would tour. They would go town to town, bring in some extras, run them through some drills, some matches, some promos. In 2012, I did the same thing. And from there, they choose who they want to send for their week-long tryouts in Florida. And then from there, they trim the herd, choose the ones they want. They come to Canada maybe twice a year if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Once maybe Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, 2 out of the 3 for TVs, maybe 1 in BC or 1 in Calgary, Edmonton. And that's about it. When I was working in New England, those guys are telling me, oh yeah, I had 5, 6 tryouts this year. It's like, here I am today, 15 years, almost 16 years into my career. I've had 4 TV tryouts. Some of those guys are getting that many tryouts and more in a calendar year, getting that many looks. Canada, what are we getting? How many people are they realistically looking at? They come here for 1 or 2 shows, look at maybe, 6 to 20 talents, let's say. I'll be very generous. And then they kind of choose based on that. Are they always choosing the best? I don't know. I see some people fresh out of wrestling school getting extra work. It's not really the best of the best of the best that they're taking, because there's no scouting here. And I think scouting is the only way that will change. They have an NXT UK. Guys from the UK getting signed from there, just work the independents, be good at one thing, be coachable, all the stuff they tell you, getting fast-tracked into the system. We don't have that here. Now, I'm not saying we should have an NXT Canada, and I'm very firm on that stance. I've been misquoted. Even my own boys at Jofo have misquoted me. I am not for an NXT Canada. We don't need it, because what they don't understand is that we're no different than the people in the States. We're just treated differently.
Mm.
When you think about it, we're all Americans here. I'm the first one to throw up my hand and say, God bless America. Because even though we may not be from the United States portion of North America, we're all Americans, from Canada right down to Mexico. Unfortunately, we got borders that separate us and separate us from being able to make it into those bigger companies. And then I got to deal with backlash. And if you followed any of my tweets and stuff, you've probably seen there are these Americans who will say, oh, well, you just got to work harder. You just got to make yourself undeniable. You just got to work yourself out of it. Well, let me tell you this. Here's a couple facts I'll throw at you. And this is why they call me the harbinger of truth. I'm going to try to keep my temper a little bit in check, but it's something near and dear to my heart. So it does enrage me that we have to live through this. So talent aside, you can make yourself undeniable. I'm a guy who's always said, you see Jeremy Prophet, I may not be the best at one thing, but I do feel my skills are more well-rounded than anybody that I see. I've not seen them. If they exist, I'd love to interview them, but who can deliver as much on the mic in terms of appearance and natural, zero chemical shortcuts, no steroids, nothing like that, natural, in the gym training every day. So giving you the look, the mic skills, the in-ring ability, the athleticism, the viciousness, the realism, all of those things that I do. Find me another person that does all the things I do at the same level or above what I do. I've not met that person, but I'm not here to put myself over. I just use myself as an example that scouting doesn't exist because of that. But let's say, we just got to work hard. We got to be undeniable. I feel I'm pretty undeniable. But when it comes down to it, you can see all those things on YouTube. There's no borders on the internet. But what you don't see is if someone loves the wrestling business. You don't see if they got a good mind for the wrestling business. You don't see if there's someone who's fun to be around in a locker room. You don't see if there's someone who has a good character, if there's someone who's positive. You don't see if that person, might be a rapist or a sex offender, like all those guys that got cleaned out in the speaking out movement. You can't tell that from a video on YouTube. So not only is it the fact that we don't get to showcase our skills in the United States in the right places, but we don't get to rub shoulders with those same people who can go and vouch for the kind of human beings that we are and tell people those intangibles that, hey, not only is this guy a great talent, he's a good person. We don't have that. People are always going to go and recommend their friends. Wrestling, it's always been nepotism, backstabbing, bribery, all those kinds of things. The bottom line is it doesn't matter what you can do. And I'm living proof of this. It doesn't matter what you can do if no one knows who you are. And not being able to go to the States, meet these people, rub shoulders with them, have encounters like I did with guys like Fit Finley, with guys like Mike Bucci, where they see you and they see something in you. Not being able to have that firsthand experience so someone can go and open a door for you. That's what hinders us. So guys want to say, oh, you can work hard, just work harder. That's what you got to do. You got something in front of you, make a way. Okay, so back when, women were given the right to work, you're going to say that the system was constructed so that they could go and they could earn the same pay as a man, that they could get the same kinds of jobs, that they had the same opportunity. Yeah, they were allowed to work just like we're allowed to work. And you're going to go tell them, work harder, work harder. When they abolished slavery, you're going to say that the blacks were able to go and get jobs and have the same opportunities and send their kids to the best schools? Obviously not, because the system was still against them. And the system right now is still against Canada. And that's what people don't get. You can't say to someone, just work hard, just work your way out of it. And you can't say to someone, and you shouldn't be saying to someone like me, stop complaining about it. You're going to tell all those people that came out during the speaking out movement to stop complaining about it? So I'm sure a lot of people did. And they still spoke out, and only then did something happen. Because I'm a firm believer, you got to break a few eggs if you want to make an omelet, but you got to make a lot of noise if you want to be heard too. And so I ain't going to stop complaining until somebody hears me. And I would challenge anyone to come out, and if they want to debate me about this, I'll be happy to. But I want to know who these scouts are, and I want justice for Canada, because Canadian wrestlers matter just as much as American wrestlers, as Mexican wrestlers, as wrestlers in the UK, as wrestlers through all of Europe, Australia, and every damn place on the face of the planet.
100%. And, we produce some of the greatest wrestlers in the history of this industry. So, as someone, you've obviously got your finger on the pulse here. You're very well educated on this. Is it the scouting? Like, what is it? What do you see that can help change this and break this wall down so you guys can get over there and be seen in America more and get signed to these contracts?
We would need scouting the same way that like WWE has scouting in the UK, the same way that other companies look at other places, the way that Ring of Honor seems to have something with Mexico and with Australia and these other places. All it takes is a scout for Canada. It takes someone in that position who's there to say, I'm going to look at the Canadian independent scene. I'm going to look at the top feds in Canada. We're going to look at what is the equivalent of a PWG or an Evolve in Canada and look at the talent. It's just to look. It's just to take the time to say, let's see who Canada has. And I guarantee you, Canada is an untapped reserve of oil. It's like everyone's digging for oil in the Arab Emirates when who knows? What if let's say Canada had as much oil there? We wouldn't know because nobody's looking. But that's what it's like when it comes to wrestling talent. We have guys here that are champions, that could be future champions, main eventers, Hall of Famers even. And they've been ignored. You mentioned a few people. You mentioned someone like Tyson Dukes. Why does Tyson Dukes not have a job? He's someone who I could say, and this is my magical formula for why someone should be hired. Look at any wrestling company, any major company. Take the worst guy on that roster and compare him to a person you think should have a job there. I firmly believe you just have to be better than the worst guy, and you should have a job there. You're not going to tell me a Jeremy Prophet, a Tyson Dukes, a Frankie the Mobster would be the worst guy in any of the major companies. A guy like, Hannibal, a tag team like TDT here in Quebec. Guys like the Pillars. I could go on and on. You got women even like Nicole Matthews. Like, there's this girl, Giselle, wrestling out in Wales, a Canadian that would put tons of people to shame. I encourage you guys to look her up.
Yeah, we've had a couple on our show, Alexia Nicole, Nova, the list goes on and on. They're fantastic talents.
Tons of these people, tag teams, women, heavyweights, cruiserweights, managers, commentators even. No one is looking at Canada. And it's something that needs to change. There needs to be scouting. Someone like Edge, someone like Chris Jericho, someone like even like PCO and Ring of Honor. There should be scouts in all of these companies for Canada because Canada is being forgotten. That's why I say, remember Canada, because Canada is being forgotten. And Canada has contributed so many great talents to the wrestling business. And I think that everyone really should galvanize on this issue and keep making noise about it. Because, people will get upset for a couple of days, but then they just go back to being, and maybe it's the Canadian way to just be, ho-hum and polite about these kinds of things. I'm not that way. I'm not. I live, eat, breathe, and sleep this issue every single day. You're not going to see me on a podcast like a lot of these people, all smiles, having a good time. And I know we're living through rough times, but this is the main issue I need to get across because we need to make sure someone's going to listen. Look, finally, NXT is on live on Wednesdays in Canada.
Yeah, how long did that take, right?
They took, exactly. Look how long it took because no one cares about Canada. Canada's being forgotten. And it's really to the detriment of all those companies, but also to the talents here. It's when it comes down to it, for me, this is the number one issue, but it shouldn't be me. I don't want to be a politician. I don't want to be an activist, but it takes someone with the gumption, the temerity and the guts and the ability to orate it in a way that people understand the issue in plain black and white to deliver the harsh reality of what it is. And, some people may not like me. I don't care if they don't like me because it's the message, not the messenger. The truth hurts. This is the truth. This is what we're facing. And until we overcome this, tons and tons of people, their work will be for nothing because it's like the tree fallen in the damn forest with no one to hear it. And that's exactly what it is. Stuck in this purgatory. But it shouldn't be this guy with less than 300 followers who's making the most noise about it when people have their thousands upon thousands of followers who could all be mobilized to all tweet at the right person, to all like the right posts, to retweet, to be like an avalanche coming down on all these companies. But unfortunately, not everyone is stepping up. But these things take time. So I'm going to keep fighting the good fight with the resources that I have. And it's one thing that you know about me is I'm a fighter, and I will fight till the day I die to make sure that this happens for Canadians, that we can be recognized, that we can have a level playing field where our hard work is not going to waste.
100%. And, like, I'm glad you're doing this. I like to consider myself to be a pretty well-educated wrestling fan, and no more than that. I'm a fan at heart. I have no into the business at all. I had no idea about these problems. And I like to think that I'm on the pulse. I had no idea up until I started seeing your tweets recently. So I'm glad that, as small as we are as our show, we're not setting the world on fire over here, but I'm glad that I can give you that platform at least. So maybe one person can hear it and that person can tell somebody, and you know what I mean? And hopefully that this can change, because it's a shame what's going on.
Every little bit helps. And that's why I'm always thankful and eternally grateful that you guys can give me a platform like this to be able to try to reach those people. It's really something that, I mean it when I say it. Like, I'm not waking up with a smile on my face, not until we have justice. This is a huge injustice that it's gone on for too long. What I always like to use as an example too, and I gave you a few examples before, like, women in the workplace and whatnot, but it's really not much different than like Jackie Robinson and his story, in that he was the first one to go from the Negro Leagues to Major League Baseball. And then they saw, hey, maybe we ought to give these guys a chance. Let's forget about color. Let's forget about, where they're from, and let's focus on talent, on actual merits. Let's put the nepotism aside. Let's put all those things aside. We want to have the best team, and we want to, be champions and make the most money. Every professional sporting team has extensive scouting. I'm a big hockey fan. I played hockey for 15 years. I played baseball for 16 years. In hockey, I'll use that as an example because it's a good Canadian example. They have scouts in all these countries, and all throughout Scandinavia, Czech Republic, Russia, all these places in the world where they know that hockey has a foothold, because they want to get those guys into the NHL to be able to have the best team possible. Why is wrestling the exception? It's called professional wrestling. So why are these professionals not putting effort into their scouting in as many different places as possible, but especially in a place that's so geographically close to them? You look at WWE, their headquarters is in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm in Montreal, Quebec. I'm closer to WWE's headquarters than wrestlers in Florida, in Texas, in California. We are geographically closer. Ring of Honor's in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm closer to them than probably 3/4 of their roster. Same goes for a lot of these companies. And, you asked me about Impact earlier, and it's interesting because with Impact, I did do a gut check tryout with TNA in 2000, I think it was 2011 or 2012. I think it was more 2011. You can actually see a video on YouTube of, it's like gut check in Plattsburgh, New York.
Okay.
Another fun time getting stopped at the border for a tryout that I paid money out of my own pockets to go and do. All that to say, I did fantastic at the tryout. Jeff Jarrett loved me. D'Lo Brown loved me. Jeremy Borash loved me. I made a great impression on all these guys. They literally said they think I have a future in that company, in TNA at the time. Fast forward to maybe a couple of months later, my phone's not ringing. I'm not hearing back from them. I'm going to a ton of their shows. I'm seeing D'Lo. He pretty much knows me on a first name basis. And he tells me one of the last times I went, well, I brought your name up when they asked me, who are some of the impressive guys from Gut Check. I brought your name up, but there's things standing in the way. And I'm like, well, what's standing in the way? And I'm like, let's make them go away if there's things standing in the way, And finally I get it out of him where he says, I say to him, is it because I'm Canadian? And he said, that's the issue. We don't hire, he literally, in his words, we are not hiring Canadians right now. And I have to preface this by saying, this is not D'Lo Brown telling me this. He's the messenger.
Yeah.
I do believe that D'Lo was pulling for me, that he was bringing my name up to the powers that be and saying that, I could be a good asset to the company. I do believe that. I don't believe he would have lied to me, but he did say the message that came back was they are not hiring Canadians. So I was actually discriminated against by that regime of TNA back in 2011 because I was Canadian. And if you talk to a guy by the name of Alex Silva, who's a good friend of mine from here, the first TNA Gut Check winner,
yeah,
he can tell you a pretty similar story of what went on with him with the border, work visa issues, these kinds of things that stopped his career dead in its tracks with TNA as well. Now, don't confuse TNA with Impact Wrestling today, because it was a totally different regime. You know, now there's Canadians, Scott D'Amore, Don Callis, they're in charge. This was before. What I'm talking about was Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, Dixie Carter, that time period. Again, I don't know who the specific person was that was, you know, maybe said that quote. D'Lo would know better than I do. Hopefully I can get him in an interview one day. But that's what was told to me. They were not hiring Canadians, point final. So that's literally something I've had to deal with in my career. And people might say, you know, I think very highly of myself. Yeah, I do think highly of myself because I work very hard every day to be the best at all aspects of what I do. But I look at people on TV, I see the people getting hired, and I know that my talent is right on the same level as anyone who's hired. And I would not be the worst person in any company. My body of work speaks for itself. I would love to have my skills put up against the best in the world. I'd love to step in the ring with the best guys. Unfortunately, being Canadian has hindered me more than anything ever could.
Yeah, and that's not right, you know, and I've seen enough of your work, and a company I kind of want to talk about a little bit right now too is you know, the current Canadian champion and that's GNW. You do a lot of work with Hannibal. How did you get linked up with Hannibal? You know, and that's another guy. He's got a bit of a reputation around him too. What's Hannibal like? How did you get linked up with them? And you guys are still working together, obviously, the champion, right?
Yeah. Hannibal is a good friend of mine. And he's someone who's always stuck by me. I've always stuck by him. I first met him back in 2006. He had also trained at Jacques Rougeau's for a little while, but that was well before me. But they would always tell me about this guy, Hannibal. He wasn't even called Hannibal at the time, just, you know, Devin, which is his real name. And they would always tell me about him. Finally met him in 2006, had a pleasant conversation with him, and, you know, didn't think much of it. You know, just nice guy, good wrestler, great, very like impressive, big guy. A year later, I started hearing about these shows called Wrestling Super Show. And it was these shows that it started with a huge show where they had Christian was on the show, AJ Styles, Psycho Sid. It was almost like all ex, you know, TV guys or current, you know, top TNA guys at the time. And then I found out he was the guy who booked the show. And then he was doing a second tour, going to a bunch of different places in Ontario and one in Montreal. So it was ending in Montreal, but he was going to St. Catharines, Kingston, Ottawa. I think that was about it for that tour. So I got on the St. Catharines show because of a friend of mine, Chris Thorne, who's a wrestler from Ontario. He was doing a tag team match, needed another guy for the tag match. I had done pretty good matches with him, so he asked me to go and do the show. We did the match. I got to speak to Devin again, and I said, hey, I see you're doing the show in Montreal. I live there. I'd love to be on it. I also told him, if you want me for any of your other shows, hey, man, you know, you call me at 8 in the morning and there's enough time to make it to the show. You know, I'll be happy to be there. Sure enough, he shoots me an email for his show in Kingston at like 8 in the morning. And he's like, hey, I had a spot free up. If you want to find an opponent, come down and do a match. You know, you're more than welcome to. Can't pay you because it's, you know, short notice, but you know, if you want to do a match, then, you know, I'll be happy to put you on. I replied back, cool, no problem, I'm there. I dropped everything I had planned that day, got in the car, got a buddy of mine, went down, had a hell of a match. He liked the match, and then it turned out that he was supposed to fight PCO on the show in Montreal. PCO, for whatever reason, couldn't do the match. And so he needed an opponent. So he called me up and he said, yeah, I'm going to wrestle you on the show in Montreal if you want to do it. And I'm like, yeah, count me in. And to me, I was like, wow, I'm replacing PCO on a show here in Montreal. Yeah. And I even brought that to his attention. I'm like, you know, the people, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, he's pretty much a legend here. And he was like, no, I saw you working there. And I think that we can have a really good match. And yeah, I have no problems putting you in that spot. So I was like, cool. I always step up to the plate, man. I've never refused a fight with anyone. I had tons of people telling me, oh, this guy's dangerous. He's going to kill you. I'm like, cool. Bring it on. I love a good fight. That's one thing, you know, maybe it doesn't translate in, you know, watching Jeremy Prophet with the fancy coat and the sunglasses. And, you know, some people think that, you know, I'm too pretty to be a fighter, but it's, when it comes down to it, I love a good fight. You know, I love when someone can bring it, and he brings it like no other. I really think that every wrestler should step in the ring, despite the fact that he's retired now, but every wrestler should step in the ring with Hannibal. And that is the true test of one's mettle. If you can handle the chops, the brutality, the physicality, man's as legit as they come. And I got nothing but good to say about him because he's always treated me well. I've always been a cornerstone of his company. Some people think I work for, like I own part of the company, which I don't. I'm really only a wrestler, and that's pretty much all I do for GNW. But I love the fact that GNW has been able to grow so much in the time I've been a part of it. I've had a chance to have a lot of memorable matches there, and what his YouTube channel has done is nothing short of amazing. Over 250,000 subscribers, millions of views month after month, more views than NWA, Ring of Honor, Impact, a lot of these companies. It's really amazing what he's been able to do with his channel, and it's great to see a Canadian succeed on the international stage. And it's the one thing that's disappointing is that he doesn't get a lot of views in Canada. I've seen his metrics, and he said most of his views are from the United States. And I think that speaks to a bigger issue that we have here, is that the fans are not as interactive in terms of how they engage in wrestling on the Twitters and YouTube and those kinds of things here in Canada. In the States, it's a lot more interactive, liking, subscribing, leaving comments, that kind of thing. Canada's kind of a little bit behind when it comes to that. I mean, none of us are India when it comes to that, but Canada's a little bit behind. And I think that that's the only unfortunate thing, that despite all of his success, not a lot of that is due to the views he gets here in Canada.
So something I kind of want to talk about, and you were talking about his page or whatever, and maybe you could kind of take us, peel back the curtain a little bit. You were involved with you weren't involved, but you were there for a pretty memorable angle that he shot involving Terry Funk. Can you tell us the story about that? Because I watched that video of more than once, and it looked like they were laying into each other pretty stiff. What were you thinking watching that? Like, did that kind of go a little bit sideways, or was that all like planned out? Like, can you tell us the story a little bit about peel back the curtain a bit?
Terry Funk is one of the toughest, maybe the toughest man in wrestling, and a good human being, a great guy. But he is, there's expression, double tough. He's triple tough.
Yeah.
He is a tough SOB. And what I love about that, by the way, that video has, I don't know, 1 million hits on it. It's got tons of hits. Most of them are me, because I love watching that. That is a masterpiece. I encourage you all, if you guys, not you, Tyler, but your fans watching in TV land, if you haven't seen that, you can pause this interview and go and search Hannibal Terry Funk to familiarize yourself with that. And when you're done watching it, like a second and third time and whatnot, then you can come and join us here in progress. You won't have missed much. But what I love about that is a work of art. That is, I would put that press conference up against any promo, any segment ever done. And we have nowhere near the budget that these big companies have, but I was very much a part of that from its inception. That we were we had a long drive up there. That took place in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Yeah. And we had a long drive together. It took us 21 hours. I mean, we were in the car coming from Ottawa. It was Devin, myself, two of his cameramen. I feel like there was another person in the car, but I think it was about 5 of us in the car. And we had a 21-hour drive in the dead of winter from Ottawa all the way up to Thunder Bay, which people may think, oh, that's in Ontario. It can't be that far. Well, when we put it in the GPS, we were also thinking it wasn't that far. And then we realized that it would actually be quicker for us to drive to Florida than it would be for us to drive from Ottawa, Ontario to Thunder Bay, Ontario. So, wrap your heads around that one. On the way there, we had to shuffle the card because there were certain things that weren't falling into place. We didn't know if Vampiro was we were thinking he might no-show because he had no-showed some media appearances. So we had that in the back of our minds. There were a few other things that we weren't sure about. So the card ended up getting shuffled around. I ended up getting to wrestle Scott Steiner, who was initially supposed to wrestle Kevin Nash in the main event, which then became Hannibal against Kevin Nash in the main event with Terry Funk as the special guest referee. So Funk was going to be at the press conference, and Hannibal wanted to have like an interaction with him. So I concocted the storyline of, he's going to be presented with the award, or with the drawing, which it was actually it wasn't actually from a special needs kid. It was one of our cameramen who was a very good artist that drew that rendition of Terry Funk. And I had the idea of that. Pretty much the whole setup was me, choreographing the build up to it, the story, but the execution, the fight, that was Hannibal and Terry Funk. And a lot of that was just them kind of going freestyle. I mean, I walked in with Terry Funk. I walked out with Terry Funk afterwards. And I love Terry Funk because people may see, Terry Funk, he's from an older generation. They might remember him as a crazy old guy that, did a bit of a crooked moonsault and was just, a hardcore wrestler or whatnot. Terry Funk is, in my opinion, the best seller of all time. Like, watching Terry Funk sell, you will believe that this old man is getting the beating of a lifetime, is dying death, 1,000 deaths. And then when he mounts a comeback, it was always so special because he would make himself look so weak and so vulnerable. He is one of the toughest people in all of professional wrestling. And he stood toe-to-toe with Hannibal, threw down with him. And you talk about those shots, legit shots. There were legit shots. Watch it in slow motion. Watch the second slap that Terry Funk takes to his face. You're not going to tell me that was not a legit shot.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He gives them back to Hannibal, and it is so intense, and it is just perfect. And I remember him afterwards selling, I can't hear out of my ear. And his face was all bloodshot and bloody. He wasn't bleeding. Well, he was bleeding too, but he was also like bloodshot. And he just looked so beat up. And, again, I'll pull back the curtain a bit because for me, even I saw it and I'm like, and I'm laughing in the moment as it's happening because that's what Jeremy Prophet would do. Jeremy Prophet, when the camera's on, I'll say outlandish things. I'll act a certain way. I'm a heel at that time. So I'm laughing, but really on the inside, I'm thinking, man, I hope he's okay. Like, this is bad. Like, I could believe his eardrum really, really got busted. And I'm walking him back to the elevator, and we're kind of telling the journalists who were there, they need to, they give the man some space. This was an assault that happened. And we get in the elevator, and he just looks at me with a big smile, and he's like, so you think they bought it?
No way.
He starts laughing. And I mean, you people who've watched the video, you'll think that's so maniacal because the beating that he takes, it is just insanity. But he is so tough. He may be the toughest man to ever lace up a pair of boots in wrestling. Forget about Mick Foley. Forget about Stan Hansen. Forget about, all these guys, New Jack and stuff. Terry Funk is the toughest man, in my opinion, to ever grace the professional wrestling business with his presence.
I love Terry Funk. We've done a show based around Terry Funk. He's one of my favorites of all time. That's an amazing story. I'm thankful for you sharing that. I want to talk about something that you're doing currently right now, and that's airing on YouTube, and that's the PCO Justice. How much fun is that? Kind of tell the people a little bit about it. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of like Mortal Kombat meets wrestling a little bit. Is that the best way to describe it?
Well, the episodes that we're doing now is
Yeah.
kind of like Mortal Kombat. It started off as more of like a superhero show. Think of it kind of like PCO is kind of like the Frankenstein meets Superman, I guess you could say. And I'm kind of like the Tony Montana meets Jeremy Prophet, and that's pretty much the gist of it. And yeah, those are a lot of fun. That for the longest time, that replaced wrestling for me, with COVID and us not being able to have any shows here. Another point I like to underline is I've been wrestling for 15 years. And by the grace of God, I've never had an injury, never had a broken bone, never tore anything, never missed a day of work. Never had a concussion. My brain functions at full capacity. No need to worry about CTE here. And I've never had any burnout. I've never wanted to take a break. The longest break in 15 years of wrestling I ever had was 3 weeks. And that's just because Christmas and New Year's kind of lined up on a weekend and no promoter wanted to take a chance doing a show. But I love to wrestle. Promoters out there, you want to book me, book me. I'm very easy to book. I charge a very reasonable rate. And I give a hell of a show and give my 110%, whether there's 10 people or 10,000 people. Because the people always got to, in the words of the Dirty Heels, you got to give the people what they want.
That's right.
So without wrestling, PCO Justice has given me a chance to kind of express the same creativity like I would in a wrestling ring. and perform what I like to call martial art. That's me in a wrestling ring. That's me anytime there's a camera on me and it gets physical. It's not martial arts, but martial art is what I specialize in. And that's what you'll see on PCO Justice. You'll get to see a show that is part comedy, definitely a lot of action, special effects, usually with a pretty good message behind it. And it's given me a chance to work with a world-class athlete, a legend, someone who, contrary to what people may think, is not someone that I've known for a long time, because he also had left Jacques Rougeau's when I went there to train. We had never really crossed paths up until maybe 2008, 2009. Had our first match in 2015, I want to say, 2016, where we teamed with one another. And then had our first singles match in maybe 2017, a year later. So I've gotten to know him so much more from actually doing PCO Justice with him. And now he's a close friend. He's a confidant. We talk all the time. And, I think that it's a show that's entertaining, but also it's good for the fans because they'll still get to see something, see content at a time where the world is suffering. The world needs positivity. They need something that can entertain them and take their minds off of the harsh realities out there. So yeah, that's pretty much PCO Justice. You can see it every Monday night. Usually comes out around 8 o'clock, kind of coincides with Monday Night Raw. And if you get bored with Raw, well, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, search for hashtag PCO Justice, and you can see my lovely face doing battle with the monster. And I think we've got about maybe 2, maybe 3 more episodes left to go before the series has run its course. So who knows what'll happen from there. But I do have a good feeling that there'll probably be a season 2, and I'll have a pretty heavy involvement in it.
Oh, that's great, because that's some highly entertaining stuff there. So, Jimmy, you've been fantastic giving us your time here, and I don't want to keep you too much longer, but we lost Mike due to a power outage here, and I know you said you would stick around for a little bit here. You want to do a quick little countdown with me? We'll bang this out really quick.
No problem.
So we're gonna we're gonna get into the top 7 Daniel Bryan career moments, and I know we're running a little bit long here, so I'm gonna speed through this a little bit quicker than I normally would. I'm going to start right off the bat with number 7, and I'm going to go with his tag team with Kane, the Team Hell No tag team.
Yeah, I love the Team Hell No tag team.
Yeah, I think these guys did some hilarious stuff together. The stuff with Dr. Shelby, the Hug It Out match was one of the most entertaining things I think they've done on Monday Night Raw in years at that point. They were 245 days as the tag team champion, which is very impressive in the modern era of professional wrestling. WrestleMania against Dolph Ziggler and Big E. They tore the house down with the Shield, and they got to tag with the Undertaker against the Shield as well. A lot of cool stuff with Team Hell No, and I think it's kind of something that slides a little bit under people's memories when it comes to talking about Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, I think it was a great pairing, and I think it was one that WWE probably didn't know right away that they had kind of caught lightning in a bottle with them. I loved that era of Daniel Bryan, and I love that Kane, who at that point I feel was kind of in a rut. He wasn't really in a major storyline. He was coming off of that one with John Cena, and then they had him do the triple threat with Punk and Daniel Bryan that ultimately led to the creation of Team Hell No. But I think it was great to see Kane. One of the things always bugged me with The Undertaker was we never really got to see him do comedy. I think it's one of the only things we never saw him do. And, maybe the people didn't want him to do it. But I think it's great with Kane when he finds himself in these odd couple tag teams, Kane and X-Pac, Kane and the Hurricane, and Team Hell No was just another version, and maybe the best version of all of those teams. So I really enjoyed that they were a team that you could put them up against anyone. You'd get a great match. But more importantly, you put them in a segment, and it's always going to be entertaining. And at the end of the day, that's the name of the game. It's entertainment. So that's why I love Team Hell No. And I actually got to see them with Dr. Shelby at one of the tryouts that I did in 2012. So that was pretty cool. I even cornered Kane at one point too, walking down the hallway. Kind of a funny story, but Sylvain Grenier had always told me good things about Kane and said he always, gave him good advice, that kind of thing. And I went to Kane and I was like, hey, I'm trying out. Do you have any advice? And there he is, walking down the hallway. He's the tallest guy there. And he's like, I don't think I'm the right guy to ask. And I said, and he's kind of blowing me off. And then I'm like, well, Sylvain always told me you gave him good advice. He's who I've been training with. He's like, Sylvain helped train you? Okay, yeah, okay, kid. I guess I could sit down and talk to you for a bit. And he's like, oh, the business is so different now from when I started. And, it was just great because I feel like Kane is such a brilliant person and definitely someone I could learn a lot from. And his versatility just really shines through in everything WWE gives him. And I think Team Hell No was something that, hey, for me, I was super entertained by it. And I think that a lot of people were too. And that's why it's such a memorable gimmick. And it's why we're talking about it here today on the show.
Absolutely, man. And I think it added a good amount of years to Kane's career at the end there, too. Nice little bump on top there. Let's just keep moving on here. Like I said, I want to kind of bang through this one quick just because you've been so generous with your time and told us so many great stories today. So, my number 6, I'm going to that moment. It's from a January 13th, 2004, January 13th in 2014, easy for me to say, edition of Monday Night Raw. And it's when Daniel Bryan was teaming up with Bray Wyatt against the Usos in the cage. And it's that famous moment where Bryan finally turns on Bray Wyatt. I don't think I have ever seen a crowd interaction like that in my entire life of watching professional wrestling. They were with him every step of the way as my cats are doing a run in. Sorry if you guys can hear that meowing. They were with him every step of the way. Yes. You know what I mean? The arms up. Like, I can only imagine what that has to feel like as a performer.
It's what we always strive for. I mean, we want to be able to have the audience eating out of the palm of our hands. I always say with me, for example, I was never blessed with the ability to play a musical instrument, but I love the fact that being a wrestler, I get to be an orchestra conductor and I get to play the orchestra, which is the audience. And I think definitely Daniel Bryan had them eating out of his hand. And I think it spoke to actual good writing at the time, where they wrote a storyline with Bryan joining the Wyatt family that no one liked. And they were just begging on a weekly basis, don't let this be true. The Yes Movement was such a great thing. And, now they've derailed it. Now he's a lackey. Now he's under Bray, not knowing that he's really outsmarting Bray. And that sometimes in wrestling, you have a person who's over and they're here, but you got to bring them sometimes here so that they can get even higher. And it was one of the most brilliant things they did in Daniel Bryan's run, was to kind of cut his legs out from under him over and over. And it just infuriated the people more and more and more. And then they finally pulled the trigger on it. So yeah, key moment in that storyline and in Daniel Bryan's entire chase for the championship.
Well, that kind of plays in with your sentence there about cutting his legs out from under him, plays into my number 5. And that's SummerSlam from 2013, where they went ahead and put him over John Cena. Great build up to this match with the whole, Cena picked Daniel Bryan, which I thought gave him a great rub, because Bryan he was just coming off that Team Hell No run right there. He wasn't quite at main event level. He was very high in the mid card, but he wasn't quite at that level. And I think Cena got him that respect that the fans already had it, but I think that got him to a different level. They had a hell of a match. They went 26 minutes. Vince McMahon and Triple H were both involved with the build up for it. And then you get the Triple H heel turn at the end and the kind of the birth of the Authority with Randy Orton. Just great stuff all around.
Yeah. Well, I don't look back fondly on the Authority era of WWE, but when it comes down to it, Daniel Bryan did need that little dip to catapult him higher up the ranks, because they played with the real emotion of the people who wanted to see Daniel Bryan as an underdog be able to overcome the corporate system of WWE, of, him not having the look that they typically like, him not, having the body of a John Cena, but having the grassroots wrestling ability, having worked the independent scene to kind of, be a form of the American dream. And I don't mean Dusty Rhodes, but I mean, being able to work your way up to being the best in the world, to apply at your craft and, show that finally this kind of thing can be achieved. So yeah, I think that was a great moment. I think that the win over John Cena, I think Cena was the right guy to put him over. And I think Orton was absolutely the right, perfect template of a corporate villain to come in and play the foil to Daniel Bryan's hero.
100%. And I like how you said, kind of the American guy working his way up to start. And that's you're setting me up for all my points here. My number 4, I'm taking us all the way back to the very first ever main event in the history of Ring of Honor. Triple threat match between Daniel Bryan, Christopher Daniels, and Low-Ki. To me, that match had so much pressure on it because they were going for something with that. They wanted the best wrestlers. They wanted to respect the wrestling company, and they delivered. And I think without that main event, Ring of Honor would have stumbled a little bit more. I don't know if they would have even gotten to where they are now, because those guys just hit such a home run with that match. I think it's so important in the history of that company.
Well, for me, it's interesting you mentioned that because that's not a match that I saw when it happened, but I went back and watched it. And it was interesting because, I mean, at the time, it's hard to find footage of wrestling and that kind of thing. And it's like, when I heard of that match, I knew who Christopher Daniels was because of his brief flirts with WCW and with WWE. You know, they had him as a conquistador. He always seemed like this guy who was on the cusp of getting somewhere, but not quite, you know, securing that deal. And so I kind of knew who he was. I knew who Loki was. You know, I had seen the few appearances, the few tryout matches he had done, like on Jacked and Metal. Loved his style, loved what he brought to the table. The one guy I didn't know was Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson. And, you know, when I finally saw the match, it's like, okay, wow, that's what this guy is about. So being able to be in there with those guys, I don't think they could have chose any better guys to best represent their company, to best represent three unique styles too, that help to influence the modern era and take it into the next generations of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I think that match really kind of set the standard for what that company ended up becoming. Let's move on to the number 3 here, and we're going to go to a more kind of a sad moment, but it was a beautiful moment at the same time, and that was the retirement speech that he had to give on Monday Night Raw. The one thing I'll say that I take from Daniel Bryan, I don't know him personally. I've met him one time in my life. I thought he was one of the nicest guys on the planet, but you just can relate to him. He's just like a real person. You know, if you watch him on even that show Total Divas or whatever the hell, the Bellas, whatever one, his personality just comes across as very genuine, very kind, and he just let it out with that retirement speech. It was emotional, it was funny. I thought it was one of the, again, I'll say this again, one of the best moments in the history of Monday Night Raw.
I mean, I feel like I was watching WWE so closely during that Bryan run. It was such a good storyline, and his retirement was really sad because, you know, he had worked so hard to get to the top of the mountain just to have it taken away from him in maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, all I could say as a fan and as a wrestler is, you know, why did they have to work him so hard? Why did they have to have him take a million tombstones from Kane, you know, and have him go in there and work these long matches, multiple matches? You know, a guy who has it in his heart to already go out and bust his behind every night and then some for the fans. And it made you wonder, you know, should he have maybe held back? Should he have maybe done something differently? And I think what gets lost in a lot of the fanfare of Daniel Bryan is that it's a message to all of us as wrestlers that you never know when your time will come. You know, you never know when you could take that one bad bump. It's what I say to people. And, you know, you got to be careful when you practice, because there are careers that get ended in practice with injuries that could happen. It's a real thing. And you can only go so hard for so long until Father Time catches up to you. We all have a bump card, as a lot of the old veterans like to say. So, you know, it was a good lesson for a lot of people too. And I think that if Daniel Bryan's life were to be like a movie, I think that would be an important chapter of this one thing he dedicates himself to, gets taken away, but he wasn't going to take no for an answer. He was going to bite, scratch, and claw and find a way to be able to get back what he really loves in life. And yeah, that moment definitely up there as a, like you say, a sadder moment. But I think it's one that's eye-opening in both those senses, that, you know, we got to count our blessings and sometimes never say never.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I saw a clip and he was giving Paige some advice on her retirement speech, and he said, you know, I tried to find the positives in everything. And that was a good twist. I like your take on that. For my number 2 is probably maybe one of the reasons why his career was shortened a little bit. And I'm going to take us back to his Ring of Honor world title run. In my opinion, there was nobody better on the planet at that time than him. And I'll do a cheap plug here on our Instagram page right now. You check out our story. We're counting down. We're doing a tournament of the greatest Ring of Honor world champions of all time. We want to hear from you guys. Cast your votes. And in my opinion, I think he might be the greatest Ring of Honor champion of all time. 462 days as the champion, 38 title defenses. He had the Final Countdown as his entrance music, which I think is the greatest entrance in professional wrestling history. Maybe because I'm a mark for the song, I don't know, but it was so badass when he came out. You know, I think, like I said, the best work of his career, the guys that he was fighting, Austin Aries, Steve Carino, Roderick Strong, a legendary feud with. And the next night, Lance Storm, he fought. Like, who's who of wrestling? Samoa Joe, Kenta, Nigel McGuinness, unifying the pure title with Nigel McGuinness in one of the greatest matches of all time. I dare anybody to put a body of work up against this title run.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, the more you talk about Daniel Bryan, the more I'm like, wow, I guess I do have a lot in common with him, because for the longest time, I actually used as an entrance song, a song by not quite 3-6 Mafia, but 2/3 or 2/5 of 3-6 Mafia that sampled the Final Countdown.
Oh,
Love
really?
the song. Oh yeah,
I love it.
For the majority of my career as a babyface. That was my song with Juicy J on it. But also, it's interesting because yeah, he did all those great matches. We know his wrestling ability is second to none. And what I loved about Daniel Bryan, and maybe not in this time period, but I love that he always kept evolving. That you wouldn't get the same routine match. When he was fighting a Samoa Joe, it's a different match than when he's fighting a Nigel McGuinness, than, you know, when he's fighting under Pure Rules, et cetera, et cetera. He could conform to what the match required to be able to get the most out of his opponent. And I feel I'm very much the same way, in that, you know, I'll go to an opponent and find out what he does, what his best stuff is, and say, okay, well, you know, what is the match missing? What can I maybe add so that, you know, we can give the people everything with this match? And I think he was very much ahead of his time in that way. And yeah, he did put a lot of miles on his body. I remember, you know, even seeing him do that dive. He's the first guy I've ever seen do a somersault plancha, almost like, I guess Rob Van Dam kind of did it in ECW also. But, you know, Daniel Bryan would do it a lot too. And I'm like, man, there's chairs out there. You know, you could land wrong. You could hit the cement, and definitely put a lot of miles on his body. But delivered, always gave the people their money's worth. No one will ever accuse him of not being a hard worker, and maybe even doing more than he should have. But I think that's what makes a great wrestler, is knowing that these people, they pay a certain premium to be able to see quality action. You're going to be on top of the marquee. You got to make sure you deliver, especially with how many other hungry, great talents were working the undercards in those Ring of Honor shows at the time. One of the biggest compliments I ever got in my career was the last time I did the tryouts with WWE in 2012. Matt Stryker said that I kind of remind him of Kofi and of Daniel Bryan, and was saying that, you know, he saw what I looked like and everything, and my work. And he's like, I could fall into that same category if I had mic skills, which is what he was assessing was the promo. He's like, you know, that could give me an advantage on those kinds of guys. So to me, it was a huge compliment, because I think Daniel Bryan is an outstanding wrestler, outstanding worker. And I love the fact that he's relatable. I think that it's good that people can see that someone like them can reach the top of the mountain in professional wrestling. If he can do it, that means it's possible for anyone to do it.
No, absolutely. And the thing I like about the start of this title run too is the last two champions before him were CM Punk and James Gibson, or Jamie Noble, whatever you want to call him. And he won that belt, and both those guys went to the WWE, and he was like, I'm not going anywhere. This is my promotion, and I'm not leaving until somebody beats me for this. Yeah. And I thought that was kind of cool. And then, of course, the number one, I don't think you can really go any bigger than the number one. WrestleMania 30, winning the Unified World Championship at the biggest event that you can have in wrestling. They called it Yeselmania for a reason. He was at the pinnacle of his career here, and the match was fantastic on top of it. Another point I like about it too is just how kind he was with Connor, the child that they do Connor's Cure for now. I just a beautiful bond there, and he brought Connor in the ring and hugged him after, which I thought was beautiful. Can you get any bigger than that? Winning the world title at WrestleMania in the main event?
No, I mean, the whole show was built around him, and, you know, he was carrying the company. He was their major storyline. He didn't need the championship to be the most important character on the show, the ones that people were paying to see at the house shows, at the, you know, the TVs, at the pay-per-views. What gets lost in Yeselmania, I feel, though, in terms of the wrestling, is everyone looks at the triple threat with Batista and Randy Orton, but his match with Triple H to open the show, I think, was an even better match. And I'd even go as far as to say that was Triple H's best WrestleMania match of his entire career.
I agree.
And it totally set the tone for the night. I remember where I was watching it, I was at a sports bar when it was airing, and the big talk amongst everyone was, man, I hope Triple H doesn't win. It had that genuine feeling that you can only get from those special matches where it's really the true baby face and the true heel, and the people just really don't want the heel to win. They want David to overcome Goliath, and it's one of the best things they've written easily since the Attitude Era. And I loved every minute of it. The right man won. They made the right call, and I dare say we may not get another moment like that in WrestleMania.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And the people put him there. That's what I like about that too. People forced that to happen. They just really got behind him. And that just shows kind of the character that Daniel Bryan is, right? Mm-hmm. Just real quickly before we wrap up here, just a couple of honorable mentions. I'll go through quick. His feud with The Miz was good stuff. Winning the Money in the Bank briefcase in 2011. His feud with Tyler Black and Ring of Honor. They had some tremendous in-ring stuff. As well as a rare three-way dance, which you can see on YouTube, which I actually got to see live with Tyler Black, Bryan Danielson, and Kenny Omega, which is a nice little hidden gem of a match. One of my favorite Ring of Honor feuds he had was against Morishima, which I thought was spectacular. The ladder match at WrestleMania 31, going 76 minutes in the greatest Royal Rumble of all time, his first real match back from the injury, and then his work as the new Daniel Bryan. That was that was a hard one to leave off the list because I thought he did some good stuff there, but I stand by my list.
Yeah. And I think it's a great list. Clearly, you know what you're doing. You did your research. And if I were to make the list, I'd be hard pressed to come up with 7 moments that would differ from that, because I think you really hit all the high points on a fantastic talent and a good human being.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the time that you gave us today, man. Fantastic Pleasure. Stuff. Just before we let you go, let the people know where they can hear you, get a hold of you, social media, and all that stuff.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Prophet, JeremyProphet. You can find me on Instagram at The Real Jeremy Prophet. And you can hear me every Tuesday, 7 p.m. on Jofo in the Ring. And you can hear me on this show, Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. Mike, who we lost a little while back, but Tyler's still here. And I love coming on these shows. If ever you want to have me back on, I'll be happy to be here. It was great talking with you. It was great getting another platform to share my message. And if I could leave people with one final thought, it's that, I will continue fighting for what I believe in. I will fight for all the people who deserve opportunities, and I will fight for the people I care about, and that includes my brothers and sisters in wrestling as well as in the podcast community. So support your local wrestling feds, support your local podcast, subscribe, comment. The more that we do well, we're all going to win together. So the important thing is to build the best community of good people who are all brought together for this wonderful sport that we call wrestling, and that continues to unite us through thick and thin and through these rough times.
Absolutely. An open invitation anytime you want to come back. Proud member of the League of Extraordinary podcast, as we do. Guys like Jonah and Anthony and Circle Debate, Dirty Heels, great guys there. Really enjoy the work we do. So on behalf of Mike, who we lost, and on behalf of Jeremy Prophet, I'm Tyler, and you have been counted out.